Good afternoon. It is 1 p.m. and we're calling to order the regular meeting of the Board of Regents of Del Mar College on Tuesday, February 13th in the Eisenstein Boardroom. We do have a quorum. I'm going to call the meeting to order. The only regent not here today is Carol Scott, who is representing Del Mar College in Washington, D.C. at our National Legislative Summit with our Association of Community College Trustees. Let's begin, if we would, please, with a moment of silence. Thank you. Mrs. Estrada, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please join as we read together the mission statement of Del Mar College. Del Mar College provides access to quality education, workforce preparation, and lifelong learning for student and community success. Thank you. And as a reminder, Del Mar College is streaming the live audio and video from the official Board of Regents meetings on the college's website in real time, with the exception of any portions of the meeting considered as closed session by statute. We're going to begin with the recognition, and my pleasure to do this. One of our very own regents, Dr. Nicholas Adami, has been recognized as the 2017 Best of the Best Community Advocate from the Corpus Christi Caller-Times. And truthfully, I have to say, I'm finally glad that the Caller-Times has it right, and they picked you, Dr. Nick. This is long overdue. For those of you that know Dr. Adami, he's been extremely involved for not just a year or two or a few years, but many years in our community. He's president of the Tejano Civil Rights Museum and Resource Center. He's been very active, of course, in LULAC, La Feria, and their different activities and initiatives and educational aspects. President, I think, of that organization numbers of times. He's been in the paper recently for several initiatives, the Dr. Hector Garcia Health Center, and of course, more recently, something with the LULAC Council #1 involved with seeking a kidney donor. So it's with great pleasure we get a chance to recognize Dr. Adami. We've already taken our pictures beforehand, but Nick, we'd like you to say something to the group. Give us some profound citizen wisdom.
Well, and I tell everybody this, behind any individual is a driving force of volunteers. That's what it's about, community involvement. Core values are also the strongest, top of my list, that was instilled to me by my mother. Community is always first. So I do it gladly, and I will keep on doing it.
Nick, on top of all your community activities, you have been such a great region, and you represent, through your experience and your connections, our greater community. And you're always a good person to turn to for advice and for what you think. And he's sort of a quiet guy. You may have noticed that, but he's a very astute and watchful guy. And so he's someone we turn to for a lot of good thoughts and input. So thank you again for everything you've done for our community, and especially for Del Mar College.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We're going to move on to staff reports now, and the first one is going to be a student enrollment report from Dr. Silva.
I think as Dr. Silva's getting ready, I was going to tee him up. Both he and Lenora Keys have two separate staff reports, but I want everyone to know that they're inextricable from each other in the way of data and information relating to enrollment and revenues. So I want y'all to kind of keep them both in mind. One will obviously, Rita will go first, and then Lenora. But these presentations were made very closely in close unison in an effort to really produce a single message evolving around our enrollment and our revenues.
Thank you, Dr. Escamilla. Good afternoon, Regents. Usually when I present the student enrollment reports, we focus on the semester we're currently in. But this has been a different academic year and a challenging academic year. So just wanted to recap a little bit. So I'll take just a couple of minutes because the events of the fall impacted our spring. And when I say events of the fall, I'm talking about Harvey as a major event. And we presented this slide to you back when we did the fall report. Just showing it again just to remind us what was going on before Harvey hit. This credit hour, so we're looking at the fall 2016-2017 comparison of just credit head counts. And it showed how some of the initiatives that the college implemented were working. On August 23rd, we actually were up about 5%. And August 23rd is significant because that is the day before we closed for Harvey. We ended up closing for Harvey on August the 24th. So you see what our enrollment trend was there. And then this next slide also shows our credit head count when we came back from Harvey. As you can tell, when we were up from 2016, now we're below 2016. And we ended up the fall semester at 11,833 students. And that was a 1% decrease from last year. And because of Harvey, there's some initiatives that we put in effect. For example, the Harvey, and there's much more than this. I just took some highlights for you to see, but the foundation did a wonderful job in assisting 243 students for a total of 89,600 to deal with Harvey. We also kept low enrolled classes to help keep students on their academic track for completion. And we also offered students who were affected by Harvey and could provide proof of that full refunds way beyond our census date. We just thought that was the humane thing to do. And so we assisted about 89 students in that effort. So that a little bit what happened in the fall. So what about this semester? This is our current spring credit enrollment. These are our preliminary numbers, but as of last week, we were at 11,796 for the spring, which is about a 1% increase from last spring here. And so that's on the credit side. I also want to talk to you. I'm sorry.
So go back for a second. The differential you said is about 1%?
Yes, sir, from the 11,796 to the 11,667 from last.
And I'm just looking visually at it. It appears that obviously that's a smaller differential from the prior year compared to the prior years.
Correct, yes.
As you go back. So you would have expected a larger differential if things had totally returned to normal. So I guess my question is, are we still getting some Harvey impact? Are we still having students that maybe didn't come back in the fall because of Harvey that still aren't back yet? I mean,
we do believe that we still have some students in our northern counties that we serve that we will. And later on, I'm going to talk about a nudge program we're going to have with Civitas that we can go ahead and target students who were here even as the summer and the fall and have not returned for this semester, and see if there's anything we can do about getting them re-enrolled.
Is there any data or maybe even anecdotal information, perhaps from other colleges that have been through storms like this to indicate, is it a 2-semester build back? Is it a 3-semester? Is it a 2-year build back? How long does it take to kind of get back to equilibrium and normal, the path that you were on before a major event like this?
And we don't have that. We know one of our colleagues, I was speaking to Victoria College, we know they're down 3% as well. And how long does it take us to recover from this? I'm not really sure right now. And Dr. Escamilla, I know you turned on your mic. I'm not sure you have.
Yes, I've spoken to several presidents about the impact on enrollment from the various coastal schools. And I've heard everything from our enrollment went up post-Harvey immediately. Kingwood College does not have a campus, yet their enrollment went up. And I just talked to Catherine 2 weeks ago, or less. And so everything from that, and I spoke to David over at Victoria the other day, spot on with what you were saying, Dr. Silva, and there's everything in between. And so I think we're more, I think our story is much more like that story of Wharton County and Victoria and other kind of more coastal institutions. The flooding was a very different impact than the wind, and I think that's a whole different story right there as well. So we're hearing various things. But yes, and we're also hearing from the community on a regular basis, the students' stories of not having places to live still, and they've moved away to other college districts so that they can, have a roof over their head, frankly. So we're hearing lots of different stories out there. This is not going to be a short-term recovery process. There's going to be some ebbs and flows. I think we'll find migration patterns locally, moving from one county to the next or different parts of the county, and then also we'll begin to hear more about those students that have left that are trying to come back home over the next couple of years. So I think it's going to be a while.
Sure. Yeah, I 100% agree. Also wanted to just touch base a little bit on continuing education. It's another source of revenue for us. In our continuing ed, we had a downturn, a dip in the enrollment in continuing ed the last academic year. That is largely attributed to a closing of a grant and also a dip in transportation training in the area. So those are the two major areas of why we have. Now, although there's a dip there, if you look at the 5-year trend, we're still on a positive note for continuing education.
Just want to remind everybody that, again, the continuing education courses will follow the economy. So a bit of a softening in the economy locally, and you can see a correlation in that last number. So as the oil field begins to pick up, oil prices stabilize or even increase, those numbers will follow a trend right behind those prices.
Do you have any numbers to know of the roughly 4,000 decrease, how much it was related to things like transportation? Can you segmentize that even more?
I don't have that right now, but I can definitely get that
Just be
information.
curious
I can
to see.
talk to Dr. DeVette.
And even to be interesting to see further to the left on the graph when you go back to 2007, 8, 9, when we had the big recession and how things impacted on that.
Yeah, there'll be more contracts that are in negotiations at this point that are going to be more in lines with the downstream construction and development of our economy. So those companies that are coming in, such as the Exxons of the world and the like, is where you'll see more continuing education activity here in the next couple of quarters.
And which grant was it that you said was partially contributing to this?
The corporate service training grants.
There are skill development grants.
There it goes.
With Texas Workforce Commission.
And had
During
they,
this time period, they had the largest, during 15-16, they had one of the largest construction grants ever given by the state. And one of the other things that affected 16-17 was we were no longer including students or continuing education students under the age of 18. So we implemented that change.
and the reason this is a small area compared to the overall operations of college, but that's a big dip when you look at the history. More than to me, intuitively feels like just economy. Now, the corollary question is, what made it jump so much in 13-14 up to 14-15? Did that grant come in back in those days? Because that was a 4,000 increase back from 13-14 to 14-15, and then there's a 4,000 decrease from 15-16 to 16-17. So.
One-year grants? Is that what you're saying?
No, there are multiple grants. The skills development grants come from there are several of them, and they come from the Texas Workforce Commission, and they're really a contract that's written between the state and an industrial partner, a business. And so it depends a lot upon when the industry comes in. They've written them with Verstapina, Valero, M&G. They're working on one right now with Cheniere Energy. There's several that are in the hopper. They just finished one with Driscoll Children's Hospital. So it's a variety, and their time frame varies. Usually they run for a year, and then they're over.
How many of those are students that have gone to work, especially in the truck driving? Does that reflect there?
Not necessarily. No, the truck driving, commercial truck driving, tied in directly with Eagleford Shale. You had the boom in the Eagleford Shale, we had the boom in commercial truck driving, and as the oil field has slowed down, so has the commercial truck driving.
But then, if you look at what's happening in the community with Kmart closing and World Market closing and a couple of smaller businesses in the coastal bend, I would think that that's probably indicative of what we're seeing right here, too.
The other thing, so please.
So that's not necessarily continuing education numbers, do you think?
Well,
Yep.
look at the age of our students. What is our average age? 20?
4.
24. Because we take everybody. I mean, when you look at not just here.
The other thing that I want us to remember is at the last legislative session, HB 2994 was the piece of legislation that revolved around continuing education and making inclusive of the age brackets, where before only 18-year-olds were being able to be counted for reimbursement. Now 17 and even 16-year-olds who finished their sophomore year in high school will now be counted. There's a lot of, that's what Lenora was talking about. Over at the Craft Training Center, there was many of those students that we could not count towards the base year that we had taught. There was several hundred of them, in fact, that we weren't able to count in towards the contact hours for the last funding cycle. That's going to be different. What's different about that is our base year starts this summer. We're focusing in on more courses being taught to those age groups than ever before, and our opportunity to, quite frankly, capitalize on that is before us. So we had to leave a lot of those contact hours on the table that last time around because the law wasn't quite in effect. The law's playing in our favor now, and we're getting ready to ramp up. Again, we will be watching both continuing education and the credit side of the house at the same time. All of it that we're going to be presenting to you, or the vast majority of it, will be for refunding or will be available for state funding, and we want y'all to watch that with us. This won't be the last enrollment report that we have this academic year.
Good information. I guess just so, again, to say from my perspective, minor blips, 5% or so didn't bother you. This is a 15% change, so it's a big change. So I always like when going forward, we have big changes like that, more information is better.
Sure.
Okay.
Got it.
This next graph gives us a big picture how many students or how many learners Del Mar College serves on both the credit side and continuing education side. These are unduplicated numbers, so for last academic year, we served 16,000 students on the credit side and 9,673 on the non-credit side. So for that year, we served 25,673 individuals at this college. And so we think that's important to note that we're just not on the credit side, but the non-credit side, there are learners and customers as well.
That's it right there. Those are the total unique individuals that we're serving, both on the credit and the non-credit side. Question? I think Mr.
To be clear, the prior slide was duplicated numbers, courses, effectively.
No, there's 25 of these are unduplicated.
No, the slide before this.
Oh, yes, that's correct. That's right.
Right, so the
Yeah.
difference is, if someone were trying to match the numbers, this is where we get in trouble with the public, because they see numbers and they may not know.
Yes.
Minor nuances like duplicated and unduplicated make a big difference, and it's easy for people to say, well, you've got 24, almost 25,000 on the prior slide, and this one you've got 9,600. What's going on? But the key is duplicated versus unduplicated.
This is unduplicated, so these are actual individuals.
Mr. Bennett.
And is that 16,000 an estimate, or is that a real number?
No, that's a real number. Again, that's in the academic year. So
It came
it'd
in
be
at
fall,
16,000
spring, summer.
exactly?
I'm sorry?
It came in at 16?
Yeah, it did. It just came
Okay.
out 16,000 exactly. Not an estimate. It just turned out to be that.
You must be an auditor. That just doesn't look quite right when you get an even round number like that.
It did stand out.
And then moving forward, as Dr. Scamilla already alluded, we're embarking on our base year. And of course, as you know, base year is how they'll calculate our enrollment for the our state appropriation for the next 2 years. So we're keeping a close eye on it. So we're doing some things. We are actually promoting our flex entries. And this is where I have one correction. Again, it's the flex entries are the 15, 14 weeks and second 8-week classes. And this 931 should be enrollments and not head counts. So as of right now, going into the summer, we have 931 enrollments. But just to give you a comparison, this time last year, we had 786 enrollments. So we're getting a pretty good start in our base year heading into the summer.
So anything that doesn't count officially for spring will be rolled into the summer,
Correct.
which happens to be the beginning of the base year. So that's a head start.
That's a really good head start that we have so far. So we're promoting flex entries. Both the academic deans and student service deans are working really closely that we maximize our flex classes. And like alluded to before, the Civitas, we're having a nudge campaign to see the students that are affected by Harvey. We can work with them by zip codes and see what we can do about getting them back. Registration for the summer and the fall begins April 2nd. It's right around the corner as well. So we'll be having registration rallies on that. And then year-round Pell, we've heard so much about that. It's around the corner already. And we have a strategic plan to deal with that. We have students that we've identified, our current Del Mar College students, who will be directly affected by year-round Pell. We're going to send them letters from the president's office. We're also going to be sending them robocalls. Dr. Escamilla is going to record those for us and go straight to the students and say, you might be eligible for $2,960 if you go, and actually our Director of Financial Aid is already awarding these students, probably as we speak. And so we're getting a good start on summer year-round Pell. And then we're also making handouts for faculty. We know how important faculty is in providing information to our students. So especially the faculty who teach 3-semester programs, so fall, spring, summer. Before year-round Pell, they were out of Pell for the summer. So we're providing those faculty also information so they could provide that to the students. And then we're working with college relations for our marketing campaign. Because another segment of students are transient students. So our students who are in Austin or San Antonio or College Station, they come home for the summer to take some classes, and before they weren't eligible for Pell Grant, and now they are. And we also want to get to the families as well, let them know that Pell is now available for the summer. So as you can tell, we have a multi-level strategic plan on working with our direct students, who they are, and to the general public.
So question on that campaign, you said the letters and the robocalls have not gone out yet, but are about to go out?
Yeah, they have not gone out yet.
Is your system set up that when people get responses, can you identify which work, the letters versus the robocalls?
Not with our system, but we do know how many students, like, for example, one of the messages will say, go into your web DMC account and accept your summer Pell if you'd like to, and so we'll be able to match which students accepted their
But you'll know that if a student got a robocall and suddenly went in and accepted, then you can correlate those. So you can make some reasonable assumptions that robocalls work.
How effective work.
Or likewise, if they got a letter and a robocall.
Sure.
Okay.
And the plan is to do it. We want to do it before spring break. We'll probably do it at the end of this month. And then we'll do it again in late April, early May. Again, school doesn't start till early June, so we'll probably get them.
That's good to hear, because to me, one of the keys to being not just more effective, but even more efficient, is making sure as we try these things, which we can get all this data from Civitas, that we are also able to track what's working and likewise what's not working.
Sure, and be strategic. Instead of just doing a shotgun approach and we're going to just market it for the general public, now we can be very effective, and we know which students are here for the fall and the spring, use all their Pell, and we'll target them directly for the summer aid.
Great.
And can you tell us what percentage dual credit we had for fall and spring?
We were at 19.5, and we're up to probably 22.5 on dual credit. Is that correct, Dr. Escamilla? We're very close to that.
Last I saw was 22.39 or something like that percent. No percentages of different numbers too.
I was going to add, if they're receiving Pell Grants already in the spring, do they need to apply for the summer, or they're automatically?
If they're brand new in the spring, then they get financial aid twice, so they probably got it for the spring and the summer. So this year-round Pell really doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't benefit them, but they would have gotten Pell Grant either way. Year-round Pell, the people it helps the most is those who came in the fall and the spring, and ordinarily they would not have a Pell for the summer. So those are the ones who get the biggest benefit. But we are reaching out to all of them, just say, you know what, just look into your account and see what we can do just to make sure.
Wasn't that number around 4,000?
About 4,000 students who got fall and spring financial aid. It probably didn't maximize it, but got some kind of fall or spring.
Yep.
Mr. Silva.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Silva, I'm sorry. Earlier you mentioned that we would provide low enrollment classes. What number are we talking about? 10 students, 20 students? What do you consider low enrollment classes?
They vary, and I'll ask Dr. Lewis for a little bit of input, because they vary depending on the classes. They could have been 8 to 12. Is that correct, Dr. Lewis?
Right. Normally we go with 15 as our minimum.
Okay.
But it's not unusual in extraordinary circumstances for us to go 10 or 12, particularly if it's the only section offered, it's the only night section, or we'll have students in there who need it to graduate, and they'll have to wait another year before it's offered. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Dr. Silva. Next on the agenda, Lenora Keys is going to give us a mid-year budget update. Dr. Escamilla, any introductory comments on this?
This is just a follow-up from our conversations from last fall. As promised, we said we were going to come back with a mid-year budget update to talk about the effects of Hurricane Harvey on our enrollment, therefore the impact on our budget. And that's what Lenore is going to talk about today.
Thank you very much. And my presentation follows right along with Dr. Silva's, really, in that as a brief memory, I'd like to point out the budget that we're presently under 2017-18, we based that budget on some assumptions, and the assumptions that were made last summer. Primarily the one we'll talk about today had to do with the projection of enrollment, and we had projected a 5% enrollment growth. We also, at that time, had increased tuition and fees by $5, and you see the new legislation that Dr. Escamilla talked about, and then the other parts there. And our tax assumptions, too, which have come in right on target. That budget that we're under right now, we also based that upon several strategic initiatives. I'm not going to read them, but they're right there, too, as we go forward. And these are continuing to be major initiatives for the campus as we move forward. What I'd like to focus on this afternoon, though, is looking at where we are on revenues. And during the budget, state appropriations, we know, based on a biennium, and it's a set amount for 2 years. And that will come in just as predicted. We have no reason to believe that that won't continue, at $1.8 million increase over the previous year. Where we're experiencing a change has to do with the tuition and fees. And we told you when we presented the budget way back in August, September, that we would give you updates and provide information that if enrollment did not come in, then what would that mean and how would we handle it? And that's really what I wanted to deal with this afternoon. Within our budget, we had predicted a $1.6 million increase if enrollment had increased at 5%. As we know right now, I'm predicting it, we're just showing it at a 0% growth or flat if you compare it from fall to spring. If that plays out, then we're approximately $1.9 million less revenue in tuition and fees for the entire year. Okay. That also is based upon the fact that our exemptions, our discounts and exemptions and waivers is running at a higher rate than also was predicted, and our prediction was based upon the actual rates from the previous year. So within this budget, we had a 16.5% tuition discounts and exemption waivers to the academic courses. At this point in time, our mid-year review, we're right at 18.41% on discounts and exemptions. So when you take that into consideration, then that's where we're estimating the $1.9 million less revenue in tuition and fees. Right now, property tax revenues are coming in just as predicted and actually a little bit stronger, but it's a good sign. And our miscellaneous revenues are coming in just as predicted, and our revenue for bond transfer out we're leaving that at the same amount. So based upon that, we know we need to continue within the existing budget and manage our resources and manage our funds. So within that, we're looking at our expenditure budget. With salaries and benefits, we're projecting that we would be able to, through good management, reduce our salaries and benefit expense by $650,000. And then our non-salary expenditures, by maintaining a hold on some expenditures and effectively managing those expenditures throughout the rest of the year, we could save an additional $1.25 million. That would attain the $1.9 million that would be the difference in revenues. This would leave in effect the two contingencies that we've already built into our budget. And that's why at this mid-year review time, we wanted to bring with you our strategies that we're doing right now to go forward and how we would maintain those contingency funds and continue within this balanced budget. Oh, Brad, the next page, please. Well, it's in the packet. There you go. For your reference, I included, I know you can't see it, but it's in your packet. And this is in the consent agenda, which is the December operating budget. But I wanted to go ahead and include it at this point in time because this gives you a more specific rundown on the budget itself. It's where we stood at the end of December. And so if you would notice, for one thing, as you look at tuition and fees, we are running 4% below on revenue on tuition and fees, which tracked in December. And then also, as you move down through this budget line item, you'll see in the other areas within expenditures where we're running a little below in different areas. And actually, when you get down to total non-salary expenditures, we're at 22%, where last year we would have been at 27%. So this, again, is where we're already beginning to manage those expenditures to be sure that we come within budget. Questions? And this document is, I put it in twice. It's in this, within this presentation, but then also in the consent agenda. So.
Ed?
It looks to me as if this budget's really tight. Am I under the right impression?
Yes, sir, it is tight, and that's why we're presenting it today and managing. We're working with everyone across the college to manage our budgets.
And I appreciate that. Now, my concern is future budgets, because we've got a lot of bonds that we haven't issued yet.
That's correct.
And we're going to have to pay, in my estimate, another $12 million a year in interest and a sinking fund of about the same amount, $24 million a year additional. How are we going to fund that?
The bonds that are pledged for the 2014 bond issue and the 2016 bond issue, those dollars come in directly in a different fund, and they're not part of this operating budget fund.
But how do we pay for those? So that's a debt service fund.
Yes, sir. It's a debt service fund.
Okay, but we've got to pay for those.
Yes. And
how are we going to pay for that extra $25 million?
It comes in through tax revenue that the voters voted in.
I agree with that. The voters approved it.
Yes, sir.
But it's $25 million. And in 2014, how much was our tax revenue? About 50 million, maybe a little bit less?
On this, I'm sorry, I don't have that number in front of
Well,
me.
I think it's around 50 million. So we've got a 50% increase to cover these bonds.
I don't think so, sir. This is, well, what we're going to do
Help
is,
me understand it.
well, I'll be glad to visit with you in
Well, no,
particular with the
But
numbers in front
it's
of
I
me.
think it's a valid question because Ed's asked before and I've asked before, for a 5-year financial plan, we could roll in the bond cost and everything else, and we provided materials we've gotten from ACCT, and that still hadn't been done yet. So I appreciate your questions and where you're coming from.
And I'm really concerned because it's $25 additional million to cover those bonds, sinking fund and interest. And in 2014, we had about $50 million in taxes. That's a 50% increase. I don't see our tax base increasing 50% in the next couple of years, or for a long time, maybe. So I have a valid concern, I think, that we're going to have to raise those ad valorem taxes astronomically.
If I
Thank
could
you.
break in, there are two components of property taxes. If you remember back to budget presentations, you have the M&O tax rate, which is in your operating budget, which when you look at the revenue from property taxes, that's operating. Then to cover debt service is the debt service rate. So that debt service rate will have to be increased to fund
By the 25 million.
Yes, it won't come out of the operating.
And I understand that. But I combine the two because on my property tax bill, it doesn't break them out.
Right. And
So-
to the, exactly.
So
yes.
we have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've got, if we had $50 million of total tax revenue in 2014, and now we're adding 25 million to it, that seems to me to be a 50% increase in tax revenue.
I would
Well,
have to check those numbers
yeah.
to see if that actually translates to that. And you have to be careful when you're looking at property tax revenue because, again, there's two components. The M&O component, which you will see on the operating income statement here, and then the debt service component. So you have to be careful when you're talking about property tax in general. And I don't have a statement in front of me to verify. Although if you go back to the revenue slide, you'll be able to see the 50 million property taxes. That's M&O. That's not the debt service.
But that's this year. Let's go back to 2014 when those bonds were authorized.
But you won't see that number.
Well, you've got that number somewhere.
It's in the CAFR. I mean, if you want to look at
and even if it's only 40%, that's a huge increase. And my concern is, how are we going to pay for that other than increasing the property taxes by that 40%?
So let me jump in here. Maybe as I'm trying to sort this through visually in my head, what you're saying to us is you're reminding us that while the original source is property taxes, the amount, the rate applied to the property valuations, if property valuations go up the same, there's two different rates, and one is one we charge whatever rate because the voters approve the bonds, they're not approving the rate. Right. But on the operations side here, that 51 million, that's the side that's short for this year, right? And so, you're going to balance the budget. Well, but the bottom line is short, and you're having to balance the budget. And so the concern is long term, more than just, I think, what I hear you saying, Ed, about the increase in the side that impacts the property tax rate. The other thing that's impacting it really is the cost of operating the capital cost, the operating cost. And that's going to throw back onto this budget, and that's where we're going to have problems, which is why we said we wanted to move to a model of looking at a multi-year. To say, okay, once the voters approve the bond issues, we can fund that because we can raise the rate appropriately, depending on what happens with tax valuations. In the years where the tax valuations were more than what we expected, we got more revenue off of that. We paid off bonds early. But it's the M&O side, when you invest in capital, that you then have to operate and then puts a burden on this budget, and that's where we don't have a real good handle on it.
Yep. And I do have a question. The rollback, is the rollback on the total tax rate?
No.
M&O.
No.
Only on the M&O.
Okay, so we can fund the
right.
Capacity's
right.
Okay,
yeah.
That's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing, Mr. Bennett, if I may, the multi-year reports we're still working on. We did receive some money, some data. I wish it was money. We received some data over the when we all went out to Las Vegas at ACCT. We received some information from both presentations there and then from our colleagues from around the state who are doing the multi-year. We're still digesting that and trying to hammer that out so that we can show both the board and our taxpayers how these numbers roll out, both in relatively short and long-term predictions. The other thing too is what we've seen and what we know is that the enrollment has ebbed and flowed on the credit side, and it'll flow both on the credit and non-credit side. What's different is, and you pointed it out earlier, Chairman McCampbell, is the difference of continuing education, contact hours, or just overall production since 2014. That's been very, very purposeful. And what we didn't have, what we had before was increased in production of our continuing education, but we didn't have the law behind us that opened it up for those younger students. That is going to bring us more of that operating revenue, both from the credit and the non-credit side. And that's what we've got tangled up with in the community with the press and others that didn't really understand or appreciate the both sides of the curriculum. Now that we have House Bill 2994 behind us, it makes all the sense. Now it's just a matter of getting out there and getting aggressive with our enrollment management plans to fund that M&O side of our total operations. So that's what you're going to be seeing more of, and you'll be seeing more aggressive enrollment management strategies to fund the day-to-day operations.
And we've got three different components to the enrollment: the state funding, the tuition, and our taxes.
Yes, sir.
But I'm convinced the taxes are going to have to increase dramatically, and I think it's to our benefit.
Yes, sir.
To let the taxpayers know that that's going to happen, and it's a direct correlation to those bonds that they voted on.
Yes.
So I don't want people to open their tax bill and say, "What happened?"
Yes, sir.
I think we should be proactive about that.
Absolutely. Duly noted.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the College President's Report. Dr. Escamilla.
Well, on January 24th, I attended our first legislative committee meeting for the Texas Association of Community Colleges. Let me just tell you that those dates are piling up on me. I'm going to be just as busy in this interim period of our legislative session as I am going to be in a full session next year, because there's lots and lots happening, again, that affect the legislature, affect the statute, and ultimately affects our operations, such as the continuing education piece of legislation I was talking about. So lots going on there. And then shortly that same day, we moved into our first quarterly meeting for the year. Again, many, many more meetings coming up. Lots and lots of work going on with government, with our government relations liaisons up there at the association. And that concludes my report.
Any questions for Dr. Escamilla? Okay. Pending business is the next on the agenda. In Regents, you had that in your packets. In March, just to give you sort of a look forward, we will be doing our annual ethics training for the boards. We'll also cover the professional contract review that we do once a year, and we'll get an update on internal audit. And then you can see on your listing of pending items that coming out in April, we've got some other really good topics. We're looking forward to particularly the Civitas update that's going to happen in April. At this point, are there other pending items that need to be scheduled? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move into the consent agenda. There are 3 items for consent. The first item, number 1, is approval of minutes for the regular board meeting of November 14th, the workshop of December 12th, and the regular board meeting of December 12th. And then number 2, the acceptance of investments for December of 17 and January of 18. And number 3, acceptance of the financial statements for December of 2017. Is there any one of these that a regent would like to be taken off of consent and discussed separately? If not, I'll entertain a motion for consent agenda. Motion from Gabe. Do we have a second? Second from Sandra. Any further discussion by regents? Any public comments on items, consent items number 1, 2, and 3? Hearing none, all in favor for approval signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving now into our regular agenda, item number 4, discussion and possible action related to the college's quarterly investment report for the period ending November 30th, 2017. We're going to welcome to the podium Mr. Ronald Ross with, an introduction by Lenora Keys.
Thank you. I was just going to introduce Mr. Ronald Ross with Patterson and Associates, has joined us today down from Austin, and appreciate his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know typically it seems like every time I do these presentations, some of the economic data and some of the market news is kind of stale. So I'm going to kind of just talk about some of the things that's happened over the last couple of weeks. You've probably seen in the market, they've just been talking about the volatility in the market. And so it's very, very important to kind of dissect, and kind of divide between the volatility in the equity markets versus the volatility in the fixed income markets. And, as far as the equity markets, you've definitely seen just some really wild and volatile type markets. You've seen where the Dow Jones was down as much as 1,600 points one day, and up as much as 800 points in one day. And so that's really, really extreme volatility. And there's actually a couple of reasons why. And the first reason why is that, you've got economy that's moving from a more of a monetary economy to a more of a fiscal economy. And so when you look at a monetary economy, that is going to be definitely targeted towards the Fed and them keeping interest rates. And so it's essentially what they've done over the last 10 years. They've kept interest rates very, very low. They've been very, very accommodative. And, and now, since we're moving away from that, they've kind of, like I said, they've kind of put a floor underneath the volatility and kind of muted out volatility. And typical markets, definitely equity markets, on average, you get a 10% correction on average every year. And over the last 9 years, we've only seen 4 10% corrections. And if you look back on the last year itself, you've seen only 1 3% correction. So you haven't really seen that. And now we're starting to move over to more of a fiscally driven economy. And that fiscally driven economy is going to be with government spending as well as cutting taxes. And whenever you have one of those fiscally driven economies, you're going to see a lot of volatility. You'll see volatility start to rear its head as it starts to move, as what they say, normalize and work back towards equilibrium. And another thing, let's see. And another thing that's kind of been driving the economy itself, also driving the economy and causing the volatility in the market is a lot of this program trading and all the algorithms. So typically what happens is that when you have a certain trigger point as far as technicals, algorithms trigger, and then you have this program selling. And whenever you have the program selling itself, it will exacerbate the markets to the downside. And so you're seeing a lot more of that going on now, and that's the reason why you're seeing the equity markets just show the volatility that they're showing. But if you translate that over to the fixed income markets, it's a totally different story. So fixed income markets credit markets have actually been pretty stable during this time frame. You've been seeing on the short end of the markets, the markets that you guys in the investment portfolio that we manage in the fixed income markets, you've seen on the short end, you've seen a little bit of volatility, but that's just people moving on to cash and just having a flight to quality. If you look at over the last 10 years, you've seen the 10-year Treasury note. You saw the 10-year Treasury note rise to levels that you haven't seen in 4 years. If you look at T-bills, 1-year T-bills are about 1.91%. You've seen, like I said, a 10-year that's gotten up to 2.85, and then even a 30-year bond that's gotten up to 3.14. And those, we haven't seen 3% since, I want to say, March of last year. So all of those are actually really, really positive signs as far as looking forward into the economy. I always like to say the bond markets kind of foretell what the economy is going to do. And so now over the last year, you heard everybody talking about the flattening of the yield curve itself. In this slide, talking about the flattening of the yield curve, you've actually starting to see some steepening at the end of the yield curve around the 10-year and the 30-year space, letting you know that they're not seeing a recession, anywhere in the very near future within the next year and a half to 2 years. And so we're starting to see that as positive signs. And another positive sign that you got to look at whenever you see this type of volatility, you got to reflect back on what are the fundamentals of the markets. So you still see strong GDP growth. You're starting to see unemployment rates are still at all-time lows, but along with unemployment rates, you're also starting to see wage growth, which we hadn't seen in years. And I always when I look at the economy, I look at anything that's tied to the consumer. So when wage growth goes up, you got a strong GDP, retail sales numbers are better. Those are all positive signs. And then also you have the tax cuts. And, the tax cuts, in a lot of ways, you've had corporations actually put money back into their employees' pockets. So they're going to spend that money, whether that's bonuses, whether that's increasing wages, they're going to actually start spending that money. And then we haven't seen a tax rate for corporations at 21% since 1941. So we can't really quantify what that tailwind is going to be for the economy itself. But, as I said, this short term, it's definitely we're definitely see the economy continue to move and continue to have progression. But long term, there's still we really can't really tell what it's going to do long term, and so it's going to be really interesting to see. But as far as the fixed income portfolio for the college, that's a positive sign for as rates are starting to move up, we can go and invest at higher levels. Now, kind of getting into where we're seeing over at the investments themselves and the returns. As you can see, this is the pool funds excluding all of the 2016 and 2017 bond funds, you can see for November 2017, you can see that fiscal quarter earnings were around 150,000. The yield on the portfolio is 1.12%, and our WAM was only 46 days for that portion of the portfolio, and so that's quite shorter, a lot shorter than the 6-month T-bill at 127. And here's the breakdown of the asset allocation of the entire portfolio itself. You see that we're still very high in the pools because we need that type of liquidity. But even in the pools, you're really starting to see those rates move up in the pools. We went out and we definitely took some money out of cash and put some of that money into the pools. And we actually over the last couple of months have been paying down. And you've seen where we've had that drawdown by the end of the year of November 30th of 17. So here's the overview of the 2016-2017 tax bond money. You can see the WAM is a little bit longer because we're starting to know what some of the cash flows are like, so we can go out a little bit longer and invest those. So you can see the yield on that is around 126, but we also have extended the portfolio for that because we kind of know what those cash flows are. And the fiscal quarter earnings is 228,763. And here's kind of the breakdown of the asset allocation. We're able to use a little bit more commercial paper, and that's kind of giving you the biggest push and the biggest bang for your buck. You can go out 3 months in commercial paper and get around about 185 now. And so there's really, really good rates in commercial paper. And so we've made an allocation to kind of boost up the rates on that percentage of the money. And I think that's the end of the presentation. Are there any questions for me?
Regents, any questions? Does it make you feel better about the economy these days? Does it make you feel like an expert on the economy? That's what well, that's why we have people from the outside who come to advise us on this. Good. I'll entertain a motion at this point in time for acceptance of the quarterly investment report. Motion from Gabe. Do we have a second? Second from, I think Susan got there slightly ahead of you, Ed. Any further discussion by Regents? Any public comments on item number 4, the college's quarterly investment report for the period ending November 30th? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Appreciate it. Item number 5, discussion and possible action related to the college's quarterly financial statement for the period ending November 30th, 2017. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you. It's a different one, Brad. It's in the agenda. Thank you. I would like to point out, since we're looking at the quarterly, we're now looking at November. The one we spoke of before was for December, just because we weren't here in January. So I wanted to mention that as we go through this report. And I like to show the differences in the percentages as we've spent.
I was going to ask, can you pull it?
Enlarge it.
Yeah, please.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. And again, our tuition and fees are running at 4% less, and this as of November. And then as you go across for revenues, and total revenues were down by 1%. When you look at salaries, total salaries and benefits were down by 1%. And as you see across the board, how that plays out. Our contract instruction was still at a 0%, and this has to do with not paying yet one of the large contracts as far as craft training services, craft training center. However, when you look at your percentages down, when you come down to the very end, as you look at the different categories, like we were running 1% below in our non-salary expenditures at the same time as in November compared to what we talked about for December. And our contingency funds are still not touched as at this point in time. And so our total expenditures were 21% for this year as compared to 22% last year at the same time in November.
So Lenore, in theory, as we see review quarters going forward, because you're basically tightening up the budget all along, we're going to see that gap between 22%, 21% increase.
Yes, that's where we're going to begin tightening our budget and hold back on spending.
And I meant to ask this, or maybe pointed out earlier, the reason we're not doing an actual board approval to the budget is we're not permanently saying your budget's that's new amount. You're voluntarily holding back until you see, in case something does turn around, then you can modify that. We're not making a permanent modification to the budget.
That's right. We're managing within the budget. And you approve the budget as we move forward, and we do not normally come back to budget adjustments to the whole budget unless it's something extraordinary that would occur. So we're managing within this budget at the mid-year point.
And or if we ask to use the contingency,
Yes.
Right. Okay.
which it's there for. It's built for expansion and contraction of especially expansion of educational offerings.
That's right.
Lenore, I meant
Yes,
to
sir.
ask you when we were talking about the budget, we had an enrollment projection, I think, of 3%,
5%.
5%. Will we meet that projection?
No, sir, we're projecting a 0% increase. So we're projecting that enrollment would just stay flat
Remember,
compared to last year.
we set it at 5%, and going in before the storm, we were actually above. I think we were up at 6% enrollment. With what percent paid? 98% paid, which we've never had before. And just to go to show you, Mother Nature doesn't care about enrollment management, and she's going to do what she wants to do. And it was one of those circumstances, and that's why we're adjusting, Mr. Rivas, to the dollars that you all approved on the front end of our budget. And so we were really good, and then but sometimes it's better to be lucky, like they say.
Right.
We need some more luck.
Anything else you'd like to go over?
Did we cover the, oh yeah, you did flip up to the assets. Okay, great.
And then, of course, this is your current operating funds as far as the balance sheet. And it's pretty much standard as on target for everything, and we show the changes that are there. Of course, this is as of November, so the end of the quarter of November.
Great. Regents, any questions? Okay, do we have a motion to accept the financial statements for the period ending November there? Motion from Ed and a second from Gabe. Any further discussion by Regents? Any public comments on item number 5? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 6, discussion and possible action related to tuition rates to increase the per semester hour tuition from by $3 for the 2018-19 period. Welcome back again.
Thank you very much. I
Is
just stay up here.
this the Lenore Keys show day?
I think so. I think
It is today.
I appreciate it. I think there's a PowerPoint, Brian. Okay.
As Lenore's getting ready, if I may, Lenore, I just would like to say that I know Regent Scott was not able to be here, but I've talked to her several times about this move and our approach, our overall philosophy of adjusting tuition. We know that every time we do that, we affect the lives of students. We know that. At the same time, it is a necessary process of managing a college and or university. And we do this with the utmost respect and care of our students. I think you know, and for everybody watching out there, I think you all know how much we respect and care for our students. This is a necessary step. There's a couple things that we learned over the last couple of years or actually the last 3 years of adjusting tuition. There was at least a couple of years where tuition was not adjusted at all, and we stayed flat. And then we came back in a way that seemed to be inordinate to the maybe that's not the word, but it was just not appropriate to focus so much of an increase at once. And so after much debate and consultation with the board, we're moving back with a philosophy of adjusting tuition that is more balanced in little bites, if you will, from year to year. This $3, as Lenora will tell you, that we're putting out there is two parts, and keep in mind that there are two different pieces to this as she goes ahead to explain how this works for our students. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Escamillo. The first slide I'd like to show is to share a little bit of background information as to where we presently are as far as this is per semester credit hour, and we're only looking at academic credit tuition. Okay. However, this slide shows you the total required fees and tuition, so you'd have a benchmark to relate to as far as total for per credit hour. So right now our tuition per semester credit hour is $61, and we have a matriculation fee, a building use fee, a general use fee, an instructional support fee, and a student activity fee. At this time, we are not asking that any of these fees be increased. We're totally looking solely at tuition. However, I did want to give you the total as to what it would look like, okay, for $174 per semester credit hour. One of the things we like to do, and I know that it was mentioned last year, is to give a sense of comparison across what I'm going to call our market, our region. And this slide is providing the in-district tuition and the fees, so you'd have, again, a sense of the total per semester credit hours for the areas, community colleges and universities. So first of all, Coastal Bend Community College is at $70 per semester credit hour with a total of mandatory fees of $83. And I would like to say that when you go in to start comparing fees, it gets very complicated, and most colleges have a variety of fees, and so the fee number could vary as to what really, if you're looking at apples to apples. But we're trying to, in this slide, I'm showing what I consider to be required or mandatory fees, okay? So Coastal Bend is at a total of $153 per semester credit hour. South Texas College in the Valley is also at $70 in tuition with $169 in required fees, and for a total of $239. And we also included Victoria College, and their tuition is $46 per semester credit hours with fees of only $42. To benchmark comparison, I realize we're the community college and not the university. However, they are in our market areas, particularly for freshman and sophomore classes. Their tuition is $253, and you can see we went ahead and gave the college business, the College of Nursing and Health Sciences, they actually have differential tuition. And then all other colleges basically would be our benchmark of $176 for a total of $597 per semester credit hour. Also looking at TAMU Kingsville at $120 of tuition, $657 in fees, and $777 in tuition and fees. This slide is looking at what we've done ourselves as Del Mar College over the last 5 years in tuition. If you notice, in 2013-14, the board would have voted the previous semester for this to have gone into effect in the fall of 13 to increase tuition by $3. And then 14-15, we increased it by $1. And this is a part of what Dr. Escamillo was alluding to, where we did not increase tuition at all in 2015-16 or 16-17. And then this year, we did implement a $5 increase per semester credit hour to bring us up to the $61 per semester credit hour. Yes, sir.
Do you, you may not have the information in front of you, but does anyone remember what we were doing in the years prior to 13-14, particularly coming off of the recession period?
I didn't go back that far. I don't know that.
I don't remember there being any large increases. There might have been some that were just zero. But
by policy, we increased $1.
Right. By policy is, in fact, that's in my memo. I quoted the
Right.
policy there.
We did that for a while.
It's still there. Yes.
For a while, that's what we're doing.
Yes, and there was 2 years that we suspended that policy for a total of 0. And I think, Chairman McCampbell, I think going back to the years prior to 13 and 14, they were more in line with the $3 number.
Right. And this is exactly where I'm headed. I mean, this is an unfair to average over 5 numbers there, but if you take those numbers, 3, 4, 9 divided by 5, so it's almost a $2 year average. And if the prior years we were always over $1, then our policy is wrong. We need to update our policy. $1 minimum is not enough. Maybe we're not keeping up with inflation from that standpoint. In part, we're going through a period in which we've had continued push locally by the state and not doing as much tuition, and we're trying to balance that with tax revenues, and we're all concerned about that. And I'm not proposing that now. I'm just thinking I'd like to see us put an analysis on the pending list, an item to do a longer-term view of our tuition policy and see if it needs to be updated, including looking at what other colleges are doing, and are we really up to speed on what we should be doing the way we set tuition? Yeah.
We will add that to the pending list.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Moving forward, this slide is showing what we're projecting with a 0% enrollment growth, what the revenues would be. The $1 per semester credit hour is provided in policy, and in my memo I quoted the B3.21 on tuition policy, which it would increase by $1 per year per semester credit hour. If you add the $2, is which we're proposing, the $2 semester credit hour in addition to that one would generate roughly $317,000 at the $2 mark, and at the $3 mark, with enrollment staying flat next year, again, that would be the 0% increase enrollment, predicting that because that's where we are right now, then we would have $476,526 increased with enrollment as it is right now. However, if we do have a 3% increase in enrollment, which we would like to project for next year, and this summer we'll feel much more comfortable with that, at this point in time, we're showing both because it just felt appropriate at this point in time.
Summer's always the indicator as we start preparing our projections.
So the $1 plus the $2, if we do have the 3% increase, as you can tell, that generates almost $500,000 just from the increase in enrollment, okay? Then we would have $989,345 generated in revenue.
Again, we're not setting that prediction. We're just giving a range that we think we would conceivably be comfortable in. It's not a set number at this point. We still have to watch summer very carefully.
So it is the
recommendation from the administration is to go with the $2 plus $1 flat policy.
Yes, sir.
Not the $3.
Well, the $2 plus $1 board policy directs $1, and so we're proposing an additional $2 for a total of $3 per semester credit hour increase in tuition.
I don't want to do anything that discourages students from coming here. In the last year, the most feedback I've received from constituents was when we raised the tuition, and none of it was positive. We're looking at less than $1 million of increase. We spend about $450,000 a day here, 5 days a week. I would prefer that we look at the expenditures and decrease those as opposed to raising the tuition.
Do you have any recommendations on expenditures?
I have none.
And it's always one way to look at balancing the budget. This is about balancing the budget. And what makes it particularly challenging is we set tuition at this point so that we can publish it to let students know. We don't know what the tax rate is going to be. I mean, it's if the budget, if our economy tanks over the next year, by the time we get to seeing what the summer, when we see the tax rates are, we might be cutting out already for that. And if we've already cut out here, there's a lag. It's not connected when we set our revenues. We happen to know what our state revenues are going to be, because we're in the second year of the biennium, but we don't know what's going to do economy-wise. So we've got this three-legged revenue stool that we're balancing with rates or levels of dollars coming in for each of those at different times. So I think your comment is important, and it would be great if we can do that. To me, it's always been hard to how do you do that. You almost need to set it so you know you have a balanced budget, and then go into the next budget cycle saying, our goal is to reduce our expenditures this time by this, and if we can do it for next year, then we'll reduce the tuition the next year. Because if we do it in advance, and if our budget tanks from property taxes, either by rate or the valuation, we're going to have a dramatic, I mean, at that point you start laying off staff, and then you impact student quality. So it's always a tough one for me.
Yes.
Now, we've got these students walking by these new buildings being constructed, and they're not going to understand that that's borrowed money. They're going to think, we're paying for that out of the increase in our tuition. I can just tell you, that's what they're going to think. Obviously, that's not the case.
Correct.
But I don't think we're going to convince them no matter what we do.
I'll work with student government to get that word out to the degree that we can. I meet with them on a regular basis, and we talk about these very tough issues. And we have a very active student activities and student government. It's as busy as they are. It does not get out completely to the entire student population, but we'll do our best to make sure that it gets out. We have I don't think we have representation this particular time. Usually we do have some representatives here, but we have our staff that oversee their operations. We'll do our best to get it out there in our formal processes.
So when we look at the graph that's up there, or the chart rather, the table, if we continue with percent increase in growth, a $1 semester hour increase generates $158,000. A $2 does another $317,000. So in total, it's right under $500,000, $476,000. If we have a 3% increase in enrollment, then we see those numbers there. This is in a way is a tie back to the question I asked Dr. Silva earlier: is how do we know what to expect? We've not been through a Harvey before, or at least in a long time. Hurricane Celia, I guess, was our biggest impact, but Galveston has, and Houston has, and New Orleans has, and so, I mean, if there was some sort of way to determine, yeah, you're not going to get a 0%, you're going to be closer to 0, maybe 1% this next time, and the semester after that, maybe 1.5%. It's going to take you, I'm making this up, obviously, it's going to take you 4 semesters to get back to your typical 3%. That changes the scenario, too, in terms of what we do, how we balance our budget. So we've been pretty solid on our increases, subject to the increases in employment growth, subject to the ups and downs of the economy. But just to say we're going to increase it $3, there's still some risk in the scenarios, because it could be even at $3 we only be having $500,000. And I would guess at a 0% increase in employment growth, and even if we did the total of $3 per semester hour, generating the $476,000 there, we'd still be having to work on tight budgets.
Right.
Yes.
Not just the $1 million that you said, Ed. I mean, we could be having to do that just because we have a 0% increase in.
Yeah, it's not going to be absolute that the budgets will remain the same from the expenditure standpoint.
Yeah.
As we move ahead, and again, we watch summer very closely as those enrollments come in session by session to assess where our range will be.
Go back one page, if you would, Brad, to the multi-year. My comment before that about averaging the 5 years, which is not the best because the averages improve as you have more years you average over, right? And you look to see if there's any unusual blip. We've never really, probably shouldn't have done it at $1. I mean, I think that seems awfully low to me. Now go forward, if you would, on the slides, Lenora, Brad, I mean, there could be an intermediate position of what you're saying, Ed, and what others are, is that you say, well, let's increase it $2 semester hour, because that's really what it has been on average for the last 5 years. That gives us a challenge goal of still having to tighten up our budget in some areas, but it allows us, if we only did the $1 that's minimum per policy, we may generate $664,000, but I really doubt we're going to have a 3% increase in tuition the enrollment growth next year. How does staff feel about that? Do you think we're really going to have 3%?
No, we have it in there as a range. And again, we've heard, I mean, it's one thing to go ask what's happening to everybody else. We have to remain in tune with our local economy. I think that if there is an increase, it's somewhere between this two, and that's why we put this out there. And do I think it's going to be closer to the 3? I don't. I really don't know. Every year we go through this at this particular time because, as you're saying, Chairman, it's so early on. And yes, we do have to work in accordance with, our calendars that say we must begin enrolling students now to package for there is an incurred amount of risk that goes with setting it at this time.
We've got a couple of regents who punched in to ask questions or comment. Gabe Rivas, and then followed by Susan Hutchison.
I just want to ask, at this time, what percentage of our students are in financial aid? About 60?
It's usually about 70%.
About 70%? Okay, financial aid is good, but you have to do good in school to keep the financial aid. If you don't, then you have to pay out of pocket to go to school until you bring your grades back up and get that financial aid again. And I know for a fact that we end up losing students that can't afford to pay, especially after having gotten financial aid, so they just drop out of school. You're thinking that it's going to take a while for us to catch up after Harvey, and if we go up that high on the tuition right now, I think it's going to be a while before we catch up. It's difficult. I know last year we went up a lot because we hadn't gone up in 2 years. I think you're probably right that $2 a year is what we should have had in policy since way back, and adjust that as we need to. I'm more inclined to support a $2 increase, including the dollar by policy and the dollar extra, and go with the $2 increase. I think the $3 is a little bit steep. There's a lot of students that want to come to school and have to pay for it out of their pocket, or the parents don't have enough to help them, that they just don't go to school. They end up, going to the workforce.
Susan, you also punched in next.
Yeah, I'd say I agree. Particularly if I speak from my heart, I want the doors open, and it's really easy to say, I wish we were cutting tuition in half. I wish we could give it away, because I do want to keep that accessibility and keep it for all students to be able to do that. But if I think more from a business standpoint, okay, the other side of the brain, that we've got an incredible investment here. I mean, we are giving a very quality product. We look at the other community colleges, the other universities, and I think there's no question that financially and in every other way, every dollar that our students are paying is a good investment if they have it. I think I'm comforted somewhat. I'll put in a pitch for the foundation in addition to financial aid that is very available. I mean, where's Mary? Over $1 million in scholarships given away last year to students so those that we don't catch everybody, but there is a way to make some accessibility for those that are not able to through the foundation. So I also, one more thing is that I do think we got behind the ball there a little bit by having no increases for a couple of years. And I think we had to do a quick catch up. I don't want to kick this down and say, let's try to scrape by with one more year, hoping we can find some cuts in the budget, and then have to catch up if we're not able to do that.
Mr. Chairman, this is one of those two-edged sword any way you look at it. I feel by tightening the budget, that's easy said, and we think, okay, it's not going to hurt anyone. But it does hurt, because if you go down to the bottom, our students are the ones that are going to suffer. Because we'll be cutting things from them and maybe some staff. So if we went the $2 route, and I was working on a $3 route, that's $36 a semester extra. And if you think about our 75 or 70% of our students are going with financial aid and scholarships, they don't see that. The people behind the scenes are the ones that are providing, whether it's the state or federal monies, unless they get in trouble. So here's a good teaching lesson for them to say, stay in school and keep your grades up. Look at the money. We're the best deal in town. Well, in the whole area. So as much as it hurts to say, well, maybe $2, they're getting more here for those $2, tutoring, and Dr. Silva, help me if I forget something, counseling, that's not hurting them at all. I mean, they don't pay for that. Where in other colleges, they do. Certain fees for their science labs, a fee to the library. There's immense, and those things don't happen here. So that, to me, I thought about it last night, and I thought, okay, that's what it should be. That's where we want it to be. So you've got, what, 25%, maybe 30% that it's really coming out of mom and dad's pocket, or theirs.
Mr. McCampbell, I would like to say that I tend to agree with Mr. Rivas. I could support a $2 increase, but again, I think $3 is a little steep. I know that dual credit does not bring in a lot of money, but I would rather see, after looking at the charts, the 4 or 5 charts that were provided, I would rather see an increase in our dual credit classes than, increase our student tuition. I think I can support a $2 increase.
Question for staff. Is this the latest possible date we can approve it, given published dates and for registrations, or can we wait a month? I know we can't wait too long, but wait a month and do a little more. Pardon?
We're getting very close. Yes, sir.
Yeah, there would be a special called meeting if need be.
I mean, we're not going to have the perfect answer to all the questions even in a month.
Yes.
We're not. I mean, because some of it we don't get till we know what happens in the tax base, and we're not going to know about the increases, and we're not going to know about could we really cut expenses.
Correct.
So nothing's going to be perfect till later. And I do think there's some. The question floating around my mind is how likely are we to be able to really cut expenses? Wasn't that many years ago we were flat on expenses because of the recession.
Yes.
Less than 10 years ago. And now, and we cut to the bone so many things in that are just now getting back up to speed.
That's exactly right.
So my concern is that with even doing the $2, that hoping we can cut expenses, that we may not even be able to cut expenses without cutting things, as you said, Sandra, that impact students or the staff development of our faculty and continuing education and the things that they need to do to stay current and relevant to what they're teaching our students. And so, if we had a little bit of extra time where we could do some analysis, I mean, I think we ought to be more progressive going forward, and even in our expenses. And what are we spending per capita now on student compared to during the recession time? And is there ways to make that more efficient? And how much of those percents are related to directly impacting the students, and how much are overhead? I mean, where you want to cut is overhead or get more creative and efficient with things like that. But we don't have time to do that. So we're in a game where we're going to set something, and there's nothing we can do about it. I do seem to remember we can always increase it for the second semester if we needed to. Is that correct?
That'd be very difficult. Go ahead.
It would be, yes, sir, because we start registering April 2nd.
Which
microphone, please?
Microphone.
Thank you.
That'd be difficult because we began registration April 2nd and we register for the summer and the fall altogether. So it would be difficult to.
The question was, is there a mid-year adjustment that could be done for the spring? As I understand it.
Yeah, registering now, what I think I understand is we need to really ideally approve that this month or within a couple of weeks so that y'all can get the information out to students that are starting to register, but that's registering for the fall semester. So could we not come back once we see what's happening with tax valuations in the summer and begin to do some initial budget work to see how spring's looking, and if we had to increase it another $1 then, could we
registration won't be just for the fall, it'll be for the summer as well.
I said summer, I meant spring, sorry, the other S word.
For spring. An adjustment for spring next year.
For spring 2019.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Then you could, yes.
And that would have to be done in early fall because we begin enrollment for spring in November.
Yes, we already know that.
Yeah.
You could set it if we wanted to try to make a good faith effort and do $2 and then say we're going to look at what happens with tax evaluations, we're going to do some initial budgets, we're going to try to get better on analytics on numbers. And then if we had to increase it, which is highly unusual, for the spring, we would have time to do that.
Yep.
I mean, that's maybe sort of a bridge position between what everyone's saying.
Let me just make a couple points here. I meet with the students' leadership on a regular basis, and what we ask from them, I'm not saying that they're going to sit here and say, yes, charge me more money. But I do hear a version of that from the students is that all those services that we've been working for the past 5 years to rebuild here, that we cut to the bone several years ago, are just now getting back in support of the students. And that's what's creating that environment that's so special, the value, Regent Messbarger, that you're talking about, the experience that you're talking about, that they do not get anywhere else, college or university. Sorry to my colleagues out there. We remain at 1/3 the tuition. We still remain at less than 1/3 the tuition of a regional university, and much, much less. And for the type of instruction that they're receiving and the quality of instruction that they're receiving here, the value is way far beyond what we're charging them. The other piece is the exemptions. Now, Regent Estrella, you talked about dual credit and increasing that. We're holding on that for a very strategic reason. Why? Because dual credit is going to be the #1 policy issue at the next legislative session for Texas community colleges. And to interrupt what we have there is, in a way of pricing, could change both our head count for our base year and affect something that we have been building over time that we believe will be affected at the next legislative session. Something that the legislature is going to force us to act on dual credit, and it'll be a statewide policy. We don't know what that is. We're studying that. So the reason why we did not come to you with an increase in tuition with dual credit, because Dr. Lewis, that was one of the first things that she threw my way as for consideration. But then as we talked about it, we all understood that this program, if you will, of courseware out there for our high school students needs to stay intact. Why? Because it's being studied, it's being examined by the state level at various places, and all that information and all that data needs to be left untouched for this calendar year. You know, in the go-forth basis, that is an area that's going to have to change. We knew that. We've been working for years to build to this point, to where we were getting to the point of being uncomfortable with the pricing. We knew that. We were praying for that at one point, because I remember when I got here, I think we had maybe 1,200 students in dual credit or something like that. And now we have many, many more than that, and many, many more interested. I know there was things going on in Pleasanton last night. That's a whole other story. So I'm just saying it's got momentum both in the way of growth in our service area and beyond our service area, and it has momentum at the Capitol. Finally, all these great things, all these great outcomes of these students are being examined by our legislators, and they will be making I think some significant calls that will affect that part of the curriculum. Thank you.
Let me ask, one credit hour right now is 174.
Yes,
is
sir.
that correct?
Yes, sir.
And each class is about 3 credit hours, so that's about 420 something per class.
What this would do, I was showing the comparison again. If we go to which we are 174 right now, if we go to 177, and of course we don't know what the others are going to do. This is what's posted on their websites right now. We don't know what the others will do. But as a comparator, you can see particularly, I think, the value that you're talking about within the university. Comparative.
Per class, is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Yes.
At a 3-hour class would be, right, it'd be 3 times.
So that's where Sandra was doing the math. You were saying 3 times 12, it's really,
That would be 36.
Per semester.
what's really 3,
For 3 credit hours, that would be 36.
Per credit
yeah,
hour,
it's 3 times
36.
12, 36.
For 12 credit hours would be
Then times 4 classes. Times 4 classes, that's,
$36.
So Regents, this is coming as a staff recommendation based upon what they know and what their crystal ball knowledge at this point in time about what the future is going to be. And we've heard discussion both from concerns about $3 a semester hour is too much. I could live with 2. We've talked very thoroughly, I think, about the dilemma we're in with having to set tuition now when the 2 other main variables that impact tuition, our total revenue, are not known until later in the year. We've talked about the option of even doing something now and then investigating as those other revenue sources get more refined and clear, upping or changing if we had to the tuition even for the spring of 2000, this time a year from now.
I need to.
But we have to do that by the fall.
Mr. Chairman, can I add to that? I just got reminded by our Director of Financial Aid right now that they actually need to know by April 1. They have to do a cost of attendance for the year. So they're investigating. There might not be an opportunity to do a mid-year adjustment like for spring 2019. She believes that once they do a cost of attendance, they have to do it for the academic year.
Is the April 1 also the deadline for us approving this tuition increase?
We begin enrollment.
Before April 1?
Well,
It's on April 2nd.
April 2nd, but we usually print it, it goes in the system, and we have to know before then.
So you're saying we would not have time from the March board meeting to get all the internal processing that happens in time to start registering?
I don't think so.
Kathy's here.
It's not a budget issue. For the,
I mean, the answer, I don't know the date of the
Well,
March meeting, but, I mean, yes, if you wanted to, if you wanted to set the rate in March, you could do it. Of course, it's a matter of the internal processing that we have to go through to do it. But can it be done? Yes.
It's March 13th. I believe in prior years we've done that on it. We don't like to do it because it is tight on staff.
But it doesn't give us a lot of time to notify the students of the rate increase.
Right.
So that's why we normally
Right.
like to come in March.
And Susan raised a question, what additional information would we have? Well, we're not going to have this perfect knowledge about these other two revenue sources. We might have the ability to do some analysis of what's the likelihood we could really decrease expenses. You know, how do we compare some metrics and analysis of our expenses right now compared to prior years? And because we're still, in my view, if there's a way to ascertain if we're still running fairly lean and mean and we're building back programs, we shouldn't even decrease it from 3 because there's no way we're going to balance the budget, right? But to me, in my mind, the missing piece of information is what's the likelihood we could actually tighten the belt on expenses and not jeopardize student experience or quality of education.
now right now we're decreasing by $1.9 million expenses.
Right. And so, yeah, that's something we're already going to be decreasing.
We're
based
tightening the budget.
But that's again because we're talking about closer to 0% increase, not the 3%. So in my mind, I don't think
You're talking about for next year, right? The budget for next year?
Out of this budget.
Out of this budget,
Out of
okay.
this budget, we're decreasing by 1.9 million, and it is tight.
And that's because we got to 0% and not 3%.
Correct.
So, I mean, I guess my bottom line is I can live certainly with a 3%. No one likes to charge, as Susan probably said the best of all of us, likes to charge increased tuition. We'd give it away if we could, but we've got to be a business. We've got to invest in the quality of what we're going on. I mean, I can live with $3, but I want us to be, to me, this is just a reminder that we've got to get better at looking at our expenses, projecting, and not talking about this the day that it's due. We should have this discussion, although we didn't have a January meeting, we should be talking about, we've improved our budget cycle in prior years. We start talking about budget further beyond, you know, and that's the expense side of it. And we talk about the revenue side related to the state, because we spend a lot of effort on that, and there's not much we can do about we get projections on the tax cycle, but tuition, we always come up and say, okay, it's February, let's approve it, and this is what it's going to be. And it's the most imperfect of all those 3 revenue sources.
And critical.
Well, and it is critical. We did mention some, back in November and December, I briefly mentioned we did not have the in-depth analysis, and that is probably where we need to head. In terms of preparing for this. But one thing I'll also say is next year this time, going into the legislative session, preparing for the next budget, it always gets more difficult during the legislative session. I'll remind you, at least now we know what our state numbers are. Okay, every other year you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's even more precarious because then you really are, so I just want to remind us, this is actually an easier scenario than when when there's a legislative session. It's going to get more difficult because then again we're sitting here, we're talking to our government relations folks and sitting here guessing, do they love us, do they not love us, do they love us more, do they love us less at the legislature, frankly. That's really what it boils down to. And that's going to be a tougher year. So I just want to remind us, this is an easier year than it's going to be next year.
Susan, and also in answer to your question, oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, in case you haven't thought of it, even if we had the 3% enrollment increase and went up $3, we'd actually be reducing next year's tuition budget by $1 million.
Yeah.
Over this year.
That's cutting the expenditures.
That's right.
Because of the enrollment growth.
Because we're losing 1.9, we'd be gaining $1 million. We're still losing.
You're, from year to year, it's a smaller budget, in effect, cutting those expenditures out.
Well, to me, that we should probably just take our imaginary pen and draw through that bottom line of 3% increase, because there's no way. I mean, it'll snow in Corpus Christi again before we get that probably in the next semester. I mean, unless something happens economy-wise. Y'all are looking at each other like y'all know something we don't know, so.
No, we don't ever know until summertime. I know February always produces this consternation that you feel. But you know, I've been doing enrollment management for a long time, and I know to just, at this point, bite my tongue, give a range that I'm more or less comfortable with, and wait till summer. Summer's the indicator. That's when I can more solidly put out there that what I think, and that's how we've done it. We've been very accurate over the last few years. Of course, we're in an anomalous situation.
We had a cataclysmic event that impacted Corpus Christi that we don't come out of overnight.
Correct.
So things are different than it's been in the prior. Susan, in addition to your question, I thought that the only other piece of information we would have by either a called meeting or the March 13th meeting would be the question that Rito referred to as, you know, do we even have the option of increasing it halfway through the year? So that's the only other thing we'd have.
That's still open? I thought I heard him say.
He said they were checking into it.
Okay, okay. You didn't have a definite answer on that. Okay.
So.
I do think one of the points to make here, when we talk about a 0% increase in enrollment, that is recognizing that this year's budget included a 5% increase. So that, talk about reducing expenses, that will already be built in. That requirement will be built into next year's budgeting process, that we take that out. Right. That's that $1.9 million right now that we're working on.
Well, there is a flip side to this. If we were to vote for the 3 today, and assuming we find out that you could increase tuition, that means once we go through something like in the summer and find out about tax revenues and tax base and things like that, you can always decrease tuition for the spring semester, can't you?
Well, we have.
If we find out that
we'll find out.
I mean, you can't make that promise, but I mean.
From my experience, once you go up on something, you never come down. I've never seen the tax come down.
Well,
even a temporary tax.
Yeah. So just those are all the options. So Regents, what's your pleasure? It sounds like, I mean, we can defer this, so you can think about it to next month. Otherwise, we need a motion today for something and we'd vote on it.
I guess I would summarize what's going through my brain right now is that as hard as it is to vote for the $3, if we're going to do that now, I feel like each one of the regents, if you don't vote for that, you've got to be able to answer one of 4 things. You've either got to tell me that the state's going to give us more money. You've got to tell us that enrollment's going to increase significantly more than anybody in this room saying it is. You've got to identify an expense you're willing to cut back on, rather than just say, cut out the fat. You've got to tell me what that is, or you're going to plan on raising taxes. I mean, I don't know where else it's coming from.
That's pretty well summarized, I'd say.
And because I can't answer any of those 4 in a positive way, that's what's making me go, I think.
So you're willing to make a motion?
I'm willing to make that motion.
I'll second.
So your motion is to go with the staff recommendation of $3.
$3.
Okay. We have a second. Further discussion by Regents. We've had a good, thorough discussion, but what else would you?
With the understanding that that we can still change it at midterm, if provided that it's approved. Is that correct?
We will check into it, yes.
Right.
We have limitations from the Department of Education, so that's it right there. When you set, I don't want to have unreal expectations. I'd rather resolve it here, because the idea that the federal government will allow us to adjust the expected annual costs, cost of attendance in midterm, I don't see that, and I want to be very real about that. As difficult as all this is, and as much as I support and recommend this, I've got to be absolutely honest about that and upfront. I don't see them making that adjustment.
Well, do bring that back to at some point, because I think what we can and can't do, not only for this discussion, to me, this is a chance for us to say, why do we have to do it like everyone else? And if there's regulatory rules, why don't we produce a tuition schedule that's based upon a year that's not academic, but it's a calendar year, so that we can better budget this sort of stuff?
I used to drive the people in Tyler crazy with those kinds of plans and schemes and approaches. So I like that because I used to be.
Keep it up.
I used to be that. I used to be that guy, and Dr. Silva just keeps shooting me down with reality. But
it's another topic for another day. But
absolutely, duly noted.
The point is, the reason to even probably think outside the box like that, or some other out of the box idea is, folks, this comes back again next year at the same time frame. We do this every year. Except for those years where we didn't do an increase. That was an easy one. And it's for all the same reasons, those 4 reasons that Susan just articulated very well. Other discussion? Go ahead.
Well, what is the possibility of maybe postponing this until March? I think Mr. Johnson said that we could do this, and then maybe give an administration an opportunity to see if we can cut expenditures like Mr. Bennett said. Would that be a possibility? Go back, look at the budget,
Dr.
see if there's something that we can do.
What you think you could realistically do your staff in a month to come back and understand expenses, impact on expenses?
Well, in effect, we already have, and what we're doing is comparing this year to next year. And so, in effect, what we're doing is by cutting this year, we're in effect cutting next year, and that's what Mr. Johnson was just alluding to. And we've already done that by 1.9 million, and we're looking to possibly cut even more as we move ahead. So therefore, by cutting this year, in effect, those dollars will not be built into next year unless there's new revenues. So that's what we're saying. We've basically done that already, and we're expected to do some more.
Right.
So the MUF doesn't give you any additional information that you could use or time to do that. So okay.
No, These revenues are critical to their services, and I know this is never fun. It's never easy. No year is going to be easy.
Other Regent discussion about the motion on the table? We have a motion to accept the staff recommendation for $3 per semester hour. Other discussion? Comments? I will when we get to it, yeah. Any other Regents' comments? Okay, we'll open it up to public comments at this point, related to item number 6.
Yes, I can't see any reason to raise the tuition rates. I hear excuses. But I got one thing to say. If this Board of Regents and the staff would quit wasting the money, you wouldn't have to take advantage, and that's what you're going to do if you vote yes on this. You're going to be taking advantage of the students, and there's no reason for it. Like I said before, if you'll quit hiring outside attorneys, look how much money you'll get. Just all of you. Get us an out for the last year how much is paid for outside attorneys when you got one sitting right there. Okay? And then the Southside campus, that's nothing but a waste of money. And I'll keep saying that as long as it's there, and I hope come this November the bond don't pass, okay, if you put it on the ballot. Because we don't need that. And like I said, there's no acceptable excuse, for raising the tuition. All you're going to do if you vote yes is you're going to prove to everybody in the district that you're taking advantage of the students and their parents that's paying the students' tuition. And there's no excuse for it.
Thank you, Mr. Gordy. Any other public comments about item number 6 regarding the tuition? One clarification of fact, there is the bonds for the Southside campus have already been approved by the public. They are not on the ballot for November. Okay, let's take a roll call vote on this, please.
Dr. Adame?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
No.
Ms. Estrada?
Yes.
Ms. Hutchinson? Yes. Mr. McCampbell?
Yes.
Ms. Messmarker? Yes. Mr. Rivas?
No on this particular amount?
Mr. Watts?
No.
We have 6, did I count that right? Five to 3. That's right, because we're missing one Regents today. And so the motion carries. Obviously, this is a topic that I think everyone has a lot of passion about. It's not an easy topic for all the reasons we talked about. I think it's something we've got, I don't know how we can get better at this in the future, Dr. Escamilla, but we've got to get better at figuring out how we balance this three-legged stool of tuition costs to students, tuition and fees, actually, because the fee question is not even on the table yet. That's a future topic. I wouldn't even include it in this. The revenues from property taxes, which is another unknown, and then the state revenues. And it goes back to everything we've talked about, that budgeting, future forecast, looking forward 5 years. It's an area that I think we've had enough discussion in a number of ways about that we've got to get better at this. So I think that's our challenge for both the board and the management team of the college. So thank you. Item number 7, discussion and possible action adopting the fee schedule as stated in the State of Texas Education Code at a range of $0 to $24 per semester hours on laboratory course, credit, or approval rate by exception to program requirements. And she's back.
I think I have most of the day. Okay. What we're doing today is asking for a vote, really, or a review, basically to implement the code as it states, and we do this every year. What we have done this year is ask everyone to go back in the academic areas and review this. I did not bring a schedule per class, but I'll show you. What this impacts is every course that has a lab, you have to charge either the lesser of what the actual costs are for that lab to the student, or $24 maximum per lab credit. So what this involved was our deans and department chairs went back to make sure that what was in the system was accurately representing the number of credit hours per lab hour. Because as you change the combination of lecture to lab, we wanted to make sure that those were properly reflected in that fee schedule. And that's what this is doing, is just it's reaffirming that we are complying with that code and that we have updated and reviewed what's in the system. And I can say anecdotally, most of the courses went down without providing just an example of everyone. But that's exactly it. This is not changing per se the amount that we're charging. It's just reaffirming what's in the state code. And stating
And it's only related to laboratory fees, not other student fees.
Only related to laboratory fees. If you remember in my previous presentation where I showed the matriculation fees and general use fees, we are not asking that they be changed. They're not on the table.
It's compliance for statute.
Yeah.
Okay. Regents, any questions for Lenora or for Dr. Escamilla?
Made a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
I second.
The motion was, okay, and we'll come to discussion. So we had a motion and a second by Elva, so we'll go ahead and open up for discussion. Ed?
We don't really have an alternative here, do we?
No.
It's a compliance matter.
It's a mandate.
Yeah. Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by Regents? Any public comments on number 7? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote also on this one.
Yes.
Mr. Rivas?
Yes.
Ms. Smith-Parker?
Yes.
Mr. McCampbell?
Yes.
Ms. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Ms. Estrada?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Motion, oh, sorry.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 8, which is not Lenora Keys, by the way. Discussion and possible action related to the approval of the City of Corpus Christi's request to compensate the college in the amount of $8,987 for a .0917 acre right-of-way easement acquisition in the Rodfield Road section of the college's Southside property.
Yes, good afternoon. As you said, the City of Corpus Christi is seeking approval for right-of-way easement on the east side of the Del Mar campus's south side property. Sonny Garza, an independent consultant from the City of Corpus Christi, is here to petition the board. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm here on behalf of the Department of Engineering Services. I'm a consultant doing right-of-way acquisition and handling real estate matters for the city. And this is one of 2 parcels that's involved for the Rodfield Road Improvement Project. You must have heard, it's one of our bond projects, Bond 2014 project of the city. And the project involves reconstructing Rodfield from Saratoga southward to Yorktown. And the city pretty much has the right-of-way needed starting at Saratoga, but once we get to what we call the Master Channel 31, it's too narrow for us to construct what we have designed. And by acquiring 5 foot from each side of Rodfield, as you see on the exhibit there, we will enable to have a full 130-foot wide right-of-way, which will enable us to put in 2 lanes in each direction with a median in the middle, and it will enable us to construct 5-foot sidewalks and a bicycle lane or bicycle track, as they call it, and we will have a buffer lane, a buffer area between the curb and the sidewalk. What we call the parcel itself is a 5-foot wide strip, 823 feet long, and it is in the form of an easement. Y'all will retain the fee simple surface rights to it. We just need the easement, which is the right to construct our improvements within that easement area. We have made an offer in the amount of $8,987 for the 3,994 square feet at $2.50 a square foot, and because it is an easement, we discounted it down 10%, and if you multiply all that out, it comes out to $8,987. We have submitted a easement instrument that, if approved, we'd like the president to sign the easement. We will record it, and our schedule is finishing up our design here this month, putting it out for advertisement and bid, and hopefully have this under beginning construction. I believe in June. That's what I've heard from our engineers. And the project will begin at this intersection, this T intersection, which does not exist right now. Either you curve to the right, or you take that diagonal road to the left at Airlines. So we will begin at that area and start construction. So I stand by for any questions.
So basically, the obvious benefit to not only the neighborhood in improving that road out there is to us in the future use of our college campus, because we'll get a wider road. I like the thought of the 5-foot sidewalks, 2 lanes each side with a turning lane, which makes it easier, safer to turn in.
I'm sorry, correct? Raised median?
Oh, raised median,
yes,
okay. Yes. So not a turning lane. I misunderstood that.
There will be, what can I say, openings in the median for turning in each direction.
Right, we're anticipated. And I believe, am I correct in saying, August, that y'all have worked with the city staff to understand where our potential entrances in the college would be, so that would be incorporated in that?
Yes, when we master planned the South Campus, the design of Rodford Road incorporated the needs of our South Side property. Yes.
Right. And the city's always planned to do this way in terms of the T. They're just now discovering, I guess, through the engineering process that added 5 feet makes it a better project in terms of the for lack of a better term, the amenities, the sidewalks and the turning lanes where you need to have a turning lane.
That is correct. If you recall, there were some major and large electrical transmission, I don't want to call them poles, they're good-sized towers that we have to weave around as well on the east side, the west side of Rodfield there. So that 5 foot absolutely necessary so that we can fit everything in there.
Regents, questions? Do we have a motion? And this is coming, I should say, as a staff recommendation also, correct?
Yes, and just want to point out the next step to this is, again, Del Mar administration working with the city of Corpus
Yes,
Christi.
thank you.
For the land divestiture of this section that I'm pointing to right now, that the city legal is currently reviewing.
Great.
And it is our staff recommendation.
Okay, good.
Chair, I move we accept the easement, the right-of-way easement.
We have a motion from Susan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Was that you, Nick, Dr. Adame? Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by the Regents? Any public comments on item number 8? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote on this just to be safe.
Dr. Adame?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Ms. Estrada?
Yes.
Ms. Hutchinson? Yes. Mr. McCampbell?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And my apologies. I didn't realize you were here to speak on behalf of this. We could have moved you earlier in the agenda. So
That's quite all right. The topics of the financing is very interesting, so I enjoyed that.
Well, good. Well, come back anytime to listen to our financing topics. That would be great.
I was once a student here, and it was much cheaper. I remember.
Alumni, we like it when our alumni come back too. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I wonder if he was a finance student when he was here. So, item number 9, discussion and possible action related to a written request from Regents Watts and Bennett regarding, quote, 2018 January, February, March, April 3rd, Thursday, 2 p.m. meetings with volunteers from the DMC board and academic faculty to determine needed proposals to restore Del Mar's academic quality for academic students. Read just a little bit of background on this before we open up the discussion. This was, as you know, our board policies allow for a regent with the co-signing of another regent to request an agenda item. This was a request from Mr. Watts, who then had Mr. Bennett co-sign it, and we received it in December after the holidays for our January meeting, but because we didn't have a January meeting, it's going on the schedule today. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Watts. It was his request, and let him kind of introduce the subject and tell us your background. Guy, we'll ask you to turn your microphone around and turn it on, if you wouldn't mind. I know you have a big voice, but this will make the people help the people that are listening on the TV and internet to understand.
Well, as a general matter, I've always advocated freedom of speech and free flow of ideas between board members and faculty. But specifically, what's important is we need to know what are the challenges that are facing the faculty, the topics that need to be addressed. And the other question, would board members benefit by more networking for a discussion? Keeping in mind, we used to have a committee system that we had to have this kind of discussions all the time. But what I'm suggesting here is to get the board approval to sit down, relax the atmosphere next door, so to speak, and hear about the topics that need to be discussed and questions whether anything needs to be brought to the board.
So the question or the suggestion was creating some sort of formalized, structure, a meeting schedule, I guess you could call it a committee that would allow the regents to sit down with faculty and discuss topics of current interest that might need to come to the board. Mr. Bennett, I know you co-signed this. Anything you'd like to add to that before we open it up for discussion?
There is. What I want to do is get some clarification, because we spent a lot of time on actions that Mr. Watts took during the last several years, and our time is valuable and should be spent on very productive college materials, I think. Now, I do see in both the bylaws and in the policy manual that the regents are supposed to entertain the staff, the students, and the community in conversations. And when I talk to staff, they say they're not supposed to talk directly to the board. So I think we've got some confusion. I see it in the policy, yet the staff, and some of these people heard this decades ago, so it's not a recent occurrence. Maybe some of it is recent, but some of it is a long time ago. So I'd like to clarify, if we can, that the board is supposed to talk to the students, the staff, and the community. Now, we're not supposed to get involved in the detail, but there's a line there that we need to understand, and I think we're going over the ethics issues next month. But also the faculty needs to understand, it's my impression, based on the policy and the bylaws, that they should be talking to us. It's okay to talk to us. That's my question.
Mr. Chairman, if I could suggest, we've got the two chairs of the academic faculty. I would suggest that you allow them to come up and share their ideas on this proposal.
We will at the appropriate time. Thank you, Guy. This is helpful for you to clarify for your discussion today what your intent was, because when you read this literally, it comes across as something probably a little differently. And to me, the initial concern and potential red flag was, I always look at things through the eyes of how does this impact governance, because there is a governance structure in a college that most of us in a non-academic world don't understand, and there is always the concerns about our accreditation agency. We never want to do anything that jeopardizes our accreditation. So I asked Dr. Escamilla and his staff to come prepared, and Augie to give us a little bit of background about that, about the do's and don'ts of what we can and can't do. We can certainly entertain input from the faculty at that point too. And I think it's probably keeping in line with what you've said, trying to clarify what we can. Overlaid through all this is, of course, that whole issue of I guess, freedom of speech and what we can say and not say, and what takes precedent when we're trying to, make sure that we don't violate anything in terms of our SACS accreditation. So with that, I'll just turn to you first, Dr. Escamilla, and feel free to call upon your faculty and staff as needed, and legal counsel to respond.
Now, Regent, to be fair to everybody else, Regent Bennett and I had a conversation about this before, and we talked about the particular policy that has long been part of our record here at Del Mar College. And the free flow that it is alluding to, that I've always understood, is here at the board meetings. This is where the free flow of information takes place, although it's agendaed. I mean, we've got state laws that we watch after, that we have to adhere to, and there's this good book that's Robert's Rules of Order that we follow, and the like. And so we begin by saying this is the public venue from which we speak. Now, one thing I've known, and this is one of the things I've talked to Regent Bennett and a couple other regents about it over the years, is that even though I am the only employee of the Board of Regents, as per statute, we all get that. But we also, I think everyone at the college knows, I also do things very differently. I don't expect that out in the community that there will not be interface or discussions and all of those sorts of things. I do not. That's never been my position. And I've also said it over and over that I'm not that old school type of president. I was always raised in this business, if you will, by presidents that says nobody, nowhere, no how, no way speak to my board. Those are the old school presidents that I used to work for. Okay, I'm not that way. I've never operated that way. At the same time, I have always been very, very respectful of our shared governance processes, structures, and procedures. I've always opened those up at times in the beginning, in the early years, of which now there are 9.5 of those that have been passed. I didn't know that I didn't know if those would work or not, frankly. But I stayed with it for 9.5 years. I've been working those shared governance structures, the councils, meeting with the councils on a regular basis, meeting with the students on a regular basis, meeting with staff on a regular basis, and using those to formally direct policy and procedures here at the college. That's been my approach. In terms of the where we get on thin ice is where we start getting into less formal discussions about where the college should be heading and those sorts of things. And Regent Bennett, you've said it many times to me that those are the things we have to watch out for. We cannot step outside those rules. And with that, that's the way we've been operating here. And we bring everything. I don't slow anything down from my perspective from the agenda that we put forth. I make sure that as much as we can, and y'all felt them in those long meetings, as much as we can cram into 3 pages, we do. And so this is really the venue for those sorts of things. Now, yes, in the past, there were 2 different things that happened in the past, and Mr. Bennett, there were my predecessors who said no way, no how, and I get that. And then there was also other things that happened. I think in the past, I've read about them, I've heard about them, I've even seen a few of those where a regent or maybe even more than one regent interfaced with faculty and staff members of all different, not just faculty by any means, all different categories of employees, and problems arised, and we ended up in court, and some of those items and people ended up being witnesses, and that went crazy. So I've seen it ebb and flow in different ways, but let me just finish by saying this. Shared governance is something that I have felt very strongly about since the get-go. Is it perfect? I can tell you that Jim and Teresa will say no. And I can tell you that other council members will say no. But is it better than it was yesterday? Oh, I hope so. At least 9 years ago, yes. Are we out of the woods? No. But I just say that has been one of my underpinnings, philosophical underpinnings to protect and preserve, both on the formal and the informal side. I welcome anybody to the microphone to talk about things from here on.
Let me make a suggestion just to start with, because I think we all know the term governance, and we've heard the term shared governance, and we've heard the term SACS, and I think it might be appropriate now to take a few minutes and just do a basic primer. Let's remind ourselves, and this may involve you, Dr. Lewis, whoever has the right information, but I'd like to be reminded, and I bet some of the other regents would also, is what is really shared governance in a nutshell? What is the structure of shared governance and the governance structure here at the college? That's one piece of it. Secondly, what does SACS say about that? And thirdly, what's the board's role in that shared governance? Because I think what we're talking about is the flow of information ideas and how it comes to the board and how we govern, because we're a governance body, we're not a management body.
Right, thank you. Currently, there are 19 standing committees of shared governance at Del Mar College. There are 3 college-wide committees, including affirmative action, commencement ceremonies, cultural programs. And I'm going to be a little pedantic here just to make my point. There are 13 instructional committees: Curriculum Developmental Education Council, Dual Credit Advisory Committee, E-Learning Advisory Committee, Faculty Advising Committee, Faculty Council, Faculty Professional Development, Innovative Travel and Grants, Library Professional Recognition and Awards, Recognition Day Hall of Fame, Safety and Wellness. There are 2 Student Services Committees, Recruitment and Retention, and 1 Operations and Finance Committee. These committees are made up of faculty and staff. The person who leads each of these committees is either usually a faculty member or a staff member, and then there is always an institutional liaison, an administrative liaison. So one of the executive team members is an ex officio, and when decisions are made by those councils or committees, then they are brought forward to the executive team members. We look and see, is this practical, both in terms of money, but also does it violate any policy? Has it been thoroughly vetted by the other councils that it would affect? And then we bring it forward to Dr. Escamilla and bring it forward to the board. So that is our idea of shared governance.
If it's a board level discussion.
That's correct. Many times it is simply operational. And that's what gets me to my next point, the question that you asked about.
Is there an actual, for lack of a better term, organizational chart of all of that? I mean, there is a structure. People know this committee goes to this location, this committee goes to that location. Ultimately, all roads lead up to the top in terms of flow of information and
Yes, sir.
decision-making, and certain decisions, I assume, can be made at different levels depending upon what it is, correct?
Yes, sir, and all of that is on our website.
Okay.
And when you print it out, it looks like this. The other question that you ask is, what role does the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges say about the governing board, and in particular the one that most people are most cautious of, and as they should be, is it used to be criteria 3.2.6. Under the new standards now it is criteria 4.2.b, but the language has not changed, and I will read it to you. The governing board ensures a clear and appropriate distinction between the policy-making function of the board and the responsibility of the administration and faculty to administer and implement policy. And that is the slippery slope I believe everyone is referring to, that when you start discussing policy with people who have or who are charged to trust the fundamental autonomy and well-being of the institution rather than making the policy, then that's where it starts to get a little bit fuzzy.
Yep. We have B2.5 as our shared governance policy. Do you have that handy?
I do not have that in front of me.
It speaks to our practices of shared governance based on respect for the opinions and ideas of all members of the college community, including students, faculty, staff, and administration, each participating with timely input to the decision-making process as appropriate. Central to the practice of the shared governance are the college's councils and committees, and this is what we're talking about, that provide advice and recommendations to the president. We are not unlike the other 49 districts in the state. This comes up from time to time, or the other. We're probably more alike than the opposite of the other 1,300 or so community colleges around the country. And so, but we open up the microphone for anybody in the audience who will want to speak in support or to the contrary. You know, there's a delicate balance in all of this. And again, I do not subscribe to the old school way of doing things. I just have done things my way because I try to build relationships throughout the college and support those. And again, remember, we are talking about various. There are several facets to our employment, to our employee base here. It's faculty, staff, administration. I mean, exempt, non-exempt, and the like. And then all of those councils that we've been working so hard to put together. I think we even have a committee on committees. I mean, to just take it to the point to administer these sorts of things. So much work takes place. Again, B2.5 goes on beyond what I read. I don't want to read too much aloud to you all, but I encourage you all to look at it and/or we'll send it to you all.
And that's a policy, meaning it's a management operational policy. It's not a B policy, meaning it's not a board policy.
This one is.
That's a board policy?
Shared governance, B2.5, yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry if I misspoke. I may have misspoke. It's B2.5.
Could I add just a point on that?
Microphone, please.
Just speak up. Just speak up.
Closer to it.
That policy was developed by a shared governance committee. That even the shared governance committee worked on that. I was privileged to work on that committee years ago, and it's continued to be very effective. And it was put together by faculty and staff, and that shared governance, as the way it's worded in the policy, was developed, even in a shared governance manner.
The students as well. I meet with the students from. We talked about, student government earlier. We meet with them as a council of sorts. That's why when we were talking about tuition, I was able to reflect back to conversations that I've had with students over the years now, and be able to refer to them. So remember, in this shared governance policy, it does include those students, and that was not a practice before I got here, and that took some time to build up.
Mr. Chair, before we stop the discussion, let me raise the point. We have an excellent session going on at Del Mar, the second Monday of each month at 5:30 at CED 106. put on by the Coastal Bend Bays Foundation that we need to encourage our academic students to attend and to learn. For instance, yesterday we had a professional wetland scientist speaking. So every other Monday at CED 106, Mr. President, if you'll make sure the science faculty is aware of that, okay?
I will.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
And I don't know if I should ask Mr. Bennett or Mr. Watts about this or Dr. Scamilla, but is this something that the faculty is requesting to meet every month, once a month? I really don't feel like we need to create more work for the faculty if it's going to be cutting into their instructional time. I just need to know, is this something the faculty wants?
The structure that we have once a month, and Craig is here, Craig Brashears is here as faculty council chair. In fact, did we meet, what did we meet last week, Thursday or so? He can talk about that structure from the faculty council and how often we meet and what we talk about.
Hi, thank you. Craig Brashears. The faculty council meets once a month during the long semesters. We typically don't meet in January, or essentially we meet 4 times in the fall and 4 times in the spring. We typically, the members of the faculty council are elected. They represent all of the instructional departments in the college. We typically have a meeting about every month with Dr. Escamilla. We've been meeting about every month with Dr. Lewis as well. Sometimes those are together, and sometimes they're together, and then we have separate meetings as well. The faculty council essentially serves to discuss faculty issues, primarily curriculum, but they do also speak to any of the concerns that faculty may have. Some of those are those concerns are communicated directly to the president or Dr. Lewis. Some of those are formal recommendations that the faculty council feel very strongly about that need to be, I guess, presented in a little more formal fashion. We recommend a certain policy change or a certain procedure change or something to that effect. And that's basically the function of the faculty council. Now, many of these committees that we had talked about before, especially like the Committee on Committees and so forth, those typically do fall under faculty council. The faculty members that serve on those faculty-wide committees are selected, usually by request of the faculty, selected by or through the faculty council, and those recommendations are given to the president to place those faculty on those many different committees. So we do have a monthly communication to express a lot of the faculty issues and that could be anywhere from budgeting, curriculum, any of our policy, whether it's an A policy or a B policy. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Craig, we've brought many policies through over the years. Well, now you've been here two years as chair.
I've been faculty council chair. This is the second year.
Second year. So, and in previous years, Teresa, you were chair. I mean, we brought policy up. Please come to the microphone if you would come. I mean, you were chair also for 2 years, as I recall, and we brought policies forward, and things that generate. We know we would start about issues, things that would just incidents that would bubble on campus, and we'd formalize them and eventually run them through all the councils, of which all areas of the college employee base represent a faction, and all check off on these policies that we bring through. We've gotten much better than we were in the beginning years, but please, you were chair. We worked 2 solid years together as chair.
We saw a lot of progress on some of the policies, and we've got a lot we are still working on. I know you've had conversations with Craig about this.
Yeah. Oh yes.
This whole discussion. I'm going to put another hat on besides just faculty here. I'm also the vice president for South Texas for the American Association of University Professors. And one of the elements of that is shared governance. academic freedom and shared governance are kind of our two main fortes there. When we have shared governance, it is often viewed, at least from AAUP's perspective, as a three-legged stool. We've got the faculty, we've got the administration, and we've got the board, all supporting the students in their endeavors, in their academic endeavors. When I was looking at this agenda item, I saw, restore Del Mar's academic quality for academic students, and I was a little taken aback by the idea of restore, but I kind of wonder if it isn't partially that there's been a breakdown in communication between the faculty and the board about what we're doing. And I know in the past, this goes back 4 or 5 faculty council chairs before, there was a regular invitation for the faculty to come and give a presentation to the board of what's happening, and just a short report that had happened in the past that may have been before your time, Dr. Escamilla. But what it allowed for is it allowed for some of that interchange in a more formalized setting, that we could demonstrate also that communication is going on. I know that the faculty council and the administration are meeting together, and the faculty council as the voice of the faculty, representing all the different areas, and I think that's been working rather well. But maybe that's where you're not getting it from us, what's happening. It's come through a filter, which I know is your job with that, but from the AAUP perspective, we look at that as a three, all three working together. AAUP, I know, would be willing to do some presentations about shared governance from our perspective, and we do have statements that are rather well vetted on that as well, that we'd be glad to provide to the board on that. But I don't know if you have any questions.
Well, it seems to me that I'm looking at this B.25 shared governance part of our policy, right? That's at least what I can find and pull up is basically 3 paragraphs. There's a couple questions on the table here today. There's a specific idea by Mr. Watts to increase some dialogue opportunities. We haven't really addressed the gray area, or the elephant in the room is, when we go through an next accreditation, how's that going to be viewed by SACs? To me, that's the bottom line. Are they going to look at us and say, that's not really shared governance, that's over the line? Who knows? That's probably more of a legal opinion, and maybe we could call in. We've got connections. Several of y'all have served on SACs boards before, or accreditation panels. So that's, to me, the ultimate bottom line. But then there's what I see bubbling up is a related and maybe even a greater question is there an issue with what's happening from shared governance from the standpoint of the board? The board's involvement, the board's feedback, the board's role, and both of those are probably questions we can't answer today exactly. But if we could at least define what it is we need, if in fact there is something we need to study further, then we can
I'll be glad
go
to.
from that standpoint.
I'll tell you, I think Dr. Klein hit the nail on the head. There's been so many things. We've been almost acting under the. We've been doing everything out of need. There's been so many. It's been the tyranny of the urgent with so many of these policies, and just as you said, there's so much more. So we're still having to kind of dig out of years, decades of old policy that wasn't inventoried, if you will. And so that's been a lot of it. It's just like, how quick can we get this out? How quick can we do something about it? And sometimes things take years to vet and process, and a lot of that's my fault. I get that. And we don't move as quickly as we should on certain things. I own those things. At the same time, we do move a lot forward. There's just so much that has to be done today and yesterday even. That's what's been eating up our time. And when those agenda items come forth, we take them very seriously, point by point by point. And as they're brought from the faculty council to my desk, and I will farm those out for analysis and discussion to move forward. So I think that's been a lot of it, just as you're saying. There's so much more to do. So it's kind of like, I'd like to sit around and have some deep philosophical academic discussions. I miss those days. Those have been long gone, unfortunately, for too many years, because there's so much that we have yet in front of us.
But I think, I want to be clear, there's the dynamics between you as president dealing with the various councils is one thing, but what we're concerned with today here in the board, I think, is less than what you're just describing and responding to. It's more about what's the board's role and involvement in governance. Is there some way to that we can improve? I mean, from y'all's perspective, probably there might be some. We've got a regent that would like to have us be able to sit down and have these media dialogues all the time, but we've got other regents that have told me regularly, I'm very concerned we're going to violate SACS. Yeah. And Beth, from your standpoint, you've been on these reviews, and Augie, you've done some stuff legal-wise. Are we over the line in some of those things? Are we going to be over the line, or do we need to bring someone in from the outside to help us assess what we can really do?
Can I just throw in real quick, is it just SACS, or do we also have open meetings issues?
Absolutely. We have that.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chairman, the one thing, because I've been on that side of the podium, and it's very strange to be over here after 40 years, is academic freedom. Mm-hmm. And if we sit in a meeting, I'm afraid you're not going to say what you, unless you're really mad and some child made you really angry that day, you're going to come and tell us the truth. I don't want to step in your cubbyhole. And I would hate to think that any one of us would ever lead you with undue, unreasoned interpretation. It's your class is your domain. And I feel like we have an organizational chart that we should be following. And I think administration is trying to follow it. And sometimes, you know, the hardest thing to be in a school is how many personalities you have. I mean, we're talking big business here, and he doesn't act like the boss, like, you know, with the big stick. He is very open. I mean, if you've got this huge problem, have you ever, gone to the door and said, "Can I talk to you? I've got a problem."
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that, and Mr. Watts, the thing that I think would have hurt your feelings that we're going to restore Del Mar to its whatever in 1964, because I was here. And I walk into one of your classrooms or listen to the kiddos out here, students studying and, you know, going back and forth, and I'm going, gee, I'm glad I didn't have to do that. I'd still be here. So I know that you want us to know about things, and we do. But I have a great fear of sitting down with you because you know your curriculum, and you know your curriculum, and mine's so old, I probably don't know what you're talking about. But I don't want to be in your way. And because of Regent, I probably would be. So I don't think it's a matter that the board doesn't want to hear what you're doing. But according to what his job is, you know, go through the channels just like you have. And every now and then there's going to be somebody going. But if you focus on that and what's best for you and the children and the students, excuse me.
Yeah, some of them are older than we are.
I know.
So.
Not me, but anyway, I respect you for coming and opening that up, but I don't think Del Mar could be any greater than what it is. Walk out in this community. You don't have the time to go do that. And everywhere, out of 100 positive comments, I may hear one. Well, my kid didn't get to go to registration, and they don't know what to do. So I have this really nice young man named Dr. Silva that I just say, go see him. He'll point you in the right direction. But do they? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So I commend you for what you're doing, but I would rather see it do as you're doing with shared governance and let Dr. Escamilla bring it to us and sit right there. And our chairman is very good about saying, Dr. Klein, come up here and tell us what you think about this. Isn't that the way it's been happening?
And I think looking and I do think that this administration has been very open. I just want to make sure that we address any concerns that the board has about the kind of that three-legged stool that we have, that if there is an opportunity for faculty to inform you on things, that I'm sure that we would have no problem with doing something like that.
And don't forget, they always have, and the clients have been very good about keeping us informed on at least some things in public comment. Now, that's only 3 minutes, but we can always schedule something if there's another opportunity. So.
And I have a feeling you'll hear more from another client.
Dr. Klein, we welcome, anytime that you want to come, we welcome you to share some of your concerns that you have. But the gentleman, and I apologize, I don't remember your last name.
Greg Bashir.
Okay, you did mention that there was already monthly communication. My question is, why would you want to, or for anybody want to call meetings, that will take instructional time away from you, and to have Regents be there at those meetings? I feel like Miss Sandy said, it would just kind of like, okay, do I really want to say this? Do I really want not to say this if one of the Regents or 2 Regents or 3 Regents are here? So that was my concern that I have. And also my other concern was like Dr. Klein said about restoring academic quality. I think we have a great faculty already.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I will certainly pass that along in our next faculty council meeting next month. I would like to reiterate that we are looking, especially with Dr. Escamilla and Dr. Lewis, looking at that committee structure, which is that structure of shared governance that we have. Brought that to their table in December. With some concerns that some of our committees may not be functioning, may not be functioning very efficiently, and so we are actually looking at that structure this spring, and so hopefully we're going to be shoring some of that up. As far as communicating, again, it's the faculty count. And in all fairness, the faculty council does represent the largest constituent group in the college, the faculty, besides the student body. So the faculty concerns are, it is a pretty strong voice when the faculty council represents about half of the employees in the college. And I don't want to downplay that. But we are looking at strengthening up that shared governing structure we have through those committees, through our president and our executive vice president. Certainly, we would welcome the opportunity to give a monthly report or something to the board on what the faculty council has spoken about, or at least some of the things that we might have discussed in council. But I think as far as the formal recommendations that the council might make would go directly to Dr. Escamilla, if that addresses your concern.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I want to pivot the discussion back, because really what the agenda item is, I want to make sure we stay true to what's posted. What was posted was not a lengthy discussion about shared governance. If we want to have that, that's probably another topic for another day. What was posted was a specific Regents request for a motion for several sets of meetings over 4 months, I guess it was, for the third Thursday at 2 p.m. to meet with volunteers from the board and the academic faculty to determine needed proposals to restore Del Mar's academic quality for academic students. And I think this is not a motion that's been made yet and seconded. Someone may do that here in a minute. But I don't think we still answered the question is, does this particular request to be considered by the board have any legal consequences, or notwithstanding the Open Meetings Act, because we'd assume it would have to either be, if we were to pass this and we could pass this, we would have to do it, obviously comply with that law. But from the standpoint of SACS accreditation concerns or other legal concerns, what's the response on that? Either Dr. Lewis or Augie, if someone that has more information than we do about, does this pass the test or if we do this, and because it's going to be in our minutes the next time we have a SACS accreditation, right? We've had this big discussion about it, so it's going to be real easy for someone coming in to say, hey, that was fine, or we got a concern with that, and we're going to write you up on it. So.
I don't, is this on?
No, now it is.
Okay, now? I don't think per se, it violates SACS. But I think you've heard enough, and, we covered this in your ethics training, the protocols that are supposed to be followed. It's been the subject of 4 different censure issues that have been evaluated where, there is a line there. You as regents interacting with faculty members by itself doesn't violate SACS. If a faculty member wants in good faith to bring forward a policy question to you just to think about, you've got to be careful with that. If a faculty member or an employee of the college comes to you with a complaint or a grievance, you've got to really be careful with that. And so it's hard to say in the abstract that, setting this up as an informal meeting will be SACS. I'm sure Dr. Lewis would tell you you shouldn't get close to the line because the temptation is there. You can't control from one meeting to the next what subject is going to be brought forward. You have, I think you do have a shared governance structure in place. You do have protocols. They're supposed to go through the president. I think you've gotten some good ideas today about how to, in this context, in this setting, in a board meeting, get more updates from the faculty where they can express concerns or answer your questions. So I don't know if that answers it.
So just to maybe to interpret what I think I heard you say was the sheer act of having these 4 meetings may not be a violation. And I want to hear your comments on that too in a second, Dr. Lewis. But from your perspective, it's what happens, what's in the meetings. How do you know you're not crossing the line that some regents try to direct faculty what to do, or it crosses that line of academic freedom, and you're also, I think I heard you say, is why do you need it if you've already got a system of shared governance that maybe yes or no it's working, or maybe it needs improvement, but it doesn't. You don't need this on top of what's already there. Is what your take is?
And let me add 2 other things for you all to consider. The first, the policy from the SACS accreditation principles that Dr. Lewis read to you. There's a rationale under that, and we talked about this at your ethics training last February. And let me just read it to you, because this explains the distinction between the roles that you all play in shared governance. This is from the SACS Resource Manual. Effective governance includes clearly defining the roles and responsibilities of the governing board, administration, and faculty, and that each of these groups adheres to their appropriate roles and responsibilities. It is important that the overall mission and overarching policies of the institution are approved by the board, but that their implementation and evaluation are delegated to the administration and faculty in order to prevent the board from undercutting the authority of the president and other members of the administration and faculty, and thereby creating an unhealthy and unworkable governance structure. So that's the guidance that SACS gives you. Stay in your lanes, carry out your responsibilities and your duties, and be careful when you interact that you're not interfering or undercutting the president.
That would be good to reinforce next month when we do our ethics training.
And then from your statement of conduct and ethics, this is from your bylaws. This is under Section 9, Subpart E. I think this was referred to earlier. Recognizing that the college adheres to the concepts of free speech and academic freedom, encourage the free expression of opinion by all board members, and seek systematic communications between the board and students, faculty, staff, and the community, while refraining from communicating with students, staff, faculty, and the community in any way which could be interpreted as having any authority outside the meetings of the board. So that's at least one way in which you can get into trouble, and there have been specific examples where innocent interactions between board members, and I'm not talking about anybody in the board, but innocent interactions between board members and college employees has led to, and I think Dr. Escamilla talked about this, a board member being designated as a fact witness in a legal action. So I hope that's provided you with some guidance and some clarification, on what the rules are. But to tell you, interacting with faculty is either absolutely prohibited at all times or that it'll always violate SACS, I can't go that far.
Dr. Lewis, I know you would you like to add to that because you.
The only thing that I would like to remind the board of is that all of the SACS guidelines are open to interpretation by the reviewers. The reviewers bring their own histories, their own interpretations to this. it is shades of gray that we're talking about, but that's where it gets a little bit uncomfortable. Let me remind you that there were 4 community colleges in Texas at their last SACS review that were put on warning because of actions of their Board of Regents overstepping and directing faculty into what to include in degree plans. So it does happen.
What was that number again?
4.
A little louder?
4.
Okay. Great. Trustee Mayo?
This will be my parting shot. I just want to say that shared governance is an opportunity for us to improve on a daily basis. And wherever we're lacking, and we have lots to overcome, we will do it. And we will continue to work. We're working on it as we speak. We have many issues that we have to adjust and address. But like this is it. The board meetings, the way we communicate with you all as representatives of our community is here at this meeting once a month. This is our opportunity. And again, I welcome all opportunities to bring agenda items, very sound, bona fide agenda items to you all on a monthly basis, because I know at the end of the day it's not about anything else other than improving this college. That's ideally what shared governance yields, is an improved learning environment for our students / working environment for our employees. That's it, and that's what I've always done. I don't think I've wavered very much since I've arrived here 9.5 years ago. So that being said, the last thing I'll say is, and I'm always up for different ways of doing things. Thank you.
Chair, can I make a quick
Sure.
comment? I think what's needed to be said about SACS and shared governance and faculty board relations has been said. I can't leave the last line without addressing the issue of academic excellence. And if we can get anything back to the faculty, the students, and the community, it's that academic excellence is alive and well at Del Mar College.
I would echo that comment. I mean, I personally, I don't know how faculty feels about that, but I mean, I'm not saying we're perfect, but I think we do a lot of things right. I get real concerned anytime we, or individually or collectively, any one of us seems to impugn the academic excellence about what all of you on the front line are doing day in and day out with our students. So. Is there a motion? Do you want to make a motion on your proposal?
In light of everything said, I'm willing to withdraw the motion.
Okay, so no motion. Does anyone else want to try to motion it?
I'm good.
Okay, great. Okay, so nothing, any other further discussion on item number 9? Okay, great. We're going to open up for general public comments at this point. Has anyone like to address the board for general public comments? Oh, I think we have no, come on down. Welcome, Jim.
Good afternoon. My name is James Klein. I'm a professor of history here at Del Mar College. And I'm speaking to you in a number of different capacities. I'm also the president of the Texas Conference of the American Association of University Professors. And so the conversation you had a few minutes ago about shared governance, I would like to just spin off of that just a little bit and say that the principles of shared governance that have been established around the United States for the last century now have been established by the American Association of University Professors. Specifically, in 1966, the AEP adopted a statement on governance, which was approved not only by that organization, but also by the Association of Governing Boards as well. With that in mind, I do believe that there is a need for greater communication between board members and the faculty. I understand and hear concerns that those communications could create problems. And for that reason, I think that those communications should be as formalized as possible. I think rather than a committee being established by which that communication should take place, I believe the president of the faculty council should report directly to the Board of Regents, as he or she did until 2011. That was changed in 2011. I believe, as I understand, that was an A policy that was changed. And as I understand as well, there was no consultation with the faculty beforehand. Ann Thorne was president of the faculty council at the time and was informed that she was no longer going to report to the board. I think that should change. I think that on a monthly basis, the board should hear directly from the faculty council president what the council has been talking about, what the concerns of the faculty are. And by formalizing it that way as well, we can be assured then that this is all a part of the board, monthly board meeting, and the administration then as well can address any issues, any errors that the faculty council president might bring to the board, and respond to any statements made by the faculty council president as well. I would ask that you take that into consideration, make that recommendation to the administration, as I said, I believe that is a policy. It does not require board action for that to be changed. It was changed very suddenly back in 2011. I, as one person, and as speaking for the AEP, would like to see it changed just as suddenly now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Regents, as you know, we're not posted to talk about these. We can take things in. We can certainly ask staff to go back and get us the background to that. Some, if not many of you, were not on the board in 2011. Some of us that were are a lot older now, so we may not have all the details, but I think we can certainly ask the staff to take a look at that and come back with us with any thoughts and suggestions or history. So, okay. Any other public comments? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just wanted to call it to everyone's attention the invitation that's on your desk to the scholarship announcement next Wednesday at 10 a.m. on West Campus. ExxonMobil SABIC, or Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, has made a $54,000 scholarship donation for our process technology students, and this is recognizing that, and you're all welcome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other public comments? Regents, we do have a closed session to cover a few items, and so folks, if you'll give me just a chance, let me read through the language, and then we will clear the room, Regents, while we take a brief break. Closed session will be pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with legal counsel regarding pending or contemplated litigation or claims or other pending legal matters, or a settlement offer, and the seeking of legal advice from counsel on pending or contemplated legal matters or claims. And B, Texas Government Code 551.139A and B, government information related to security or infrastructure issues for computers, regarding information related to computer network security, to restricted information under security section 2059.055, or to the design, operation, or defense of a computer network and information deemed confidential under sections 552.139B, 1 and 2, with possible discussion and action in open session. So we'll break for our closed session at 3:47 p.m. It is 5:13, and we are coming out of closed session and have no action at this point. Next and last on our agenda for today is our calendaring. And we're looking at the March calendar. March 6th is our board day. As I always remind you, we don't know whether or not there'll be a workshop, so kind of hold your personal work calendars open from about 10 on just in case. Do note that that's the first Tuesday. Earlier in the meeting, I kept talking about potential meetings on the 13th, but I'd forgotten that was spring break. So it's the first Tuesday, the 6th. Then the ACC Governance Leadership Institute of San Antonio on the 21st, and we have a fair number of our regions going, 4 or 5 maybe? Yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity for a really good continuing education piece close at home and not having to go off to another city far away in another state. April 10th, Board Day. April 12th, Bernie's Crawfish Boil on Concrete Street. That's the annual event supporting our foundation and scholarships. April 27th, Employee Service Awards in the Retama Room. May, Board Day will be on the 8th, and then spring graduation on the 11th. Hard to think that we're already looking at calendars for the end of the semester. What's that tell us? That time flies when you're in education, right? Does anyone have anything else to add to the calendar at this time? If not, we are adjourned at 5:15 p.m. Thank you.